Hello, friends, and welcome. I'm Popeye, and today we're playing some more Higurashi Chapter 4. Um, just your warning about this game. It can have some pretty intense themes, which we might touch on during the stream. But there are themes of death, abuse, some pretty gory descriptions. That's not for everyone. If that's not for you, uh, by all means, please take the time to find something more enjoyable for you to watch. And hello, Samuses. Hello, Shy. How are you two doing today? Last time on this game, we snuck into the city by pretending to be an eco-tourist. And basically had our cover blown immediately because we used a stop that's probably designated just for tourists, and we got creepy eyeballs coming at us from the bus. And then we toured around with the designated person, as well as Rika, who the main character didn't realize was the daughter of one of the three families. We had some slip-ups, basically admitted that we abandoned our wife who was about to give birth to come here and take pictures of nature, and they're like, that's pretty suspicious. And what else? And then it ended with, basically, a small argument at the shrine, just about the ongoing issues with the dam project. I'm sorry to hear that, Samuses. I've also not had a fantastic day. I guess it's been a mad day. I had a bad night last night, and then this morning, I guess, today has been better, I guess. Still not fantastic. Seems like everyone's on the today sucked kind of train. I'm sorry to hear that, guys. Yeah, sometimes it feels better knowing it's not just you. This is true. Last time we ended off, we were on the image overlooking the village that they took us to from the shrine. For whatever dumb reason, you're not actually allowed to save on that cutscene, that background. So I had to skip forward just like a couple of messages to get to where I could actually save. But the gist of what those messages said was basically him going like, "Oh, it looks fantastic." And just being in awe of the view. Today you learned you might not be able to see your family for the holidays, so yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of places are like that. UK is shutting down. I'm not don't know about all of Canada, but for my part of Canada, as of the 26th, of Boxing Day, we have 4 weeks, 28 days, where you are not allowed to go outside of your region, which is, I don't know, probably like a 10 to 20 kilometer radius around you. Except for essential things, doctor's visits, work if you have to go into work, groceries, but yeah, it's gonna make a lot of things tough. It's more that you could have it and you can't get tested until more, and then you have to wait for results. Yeah, yeah. I've known two family members had to get tested. One of my grandpas had to get tested because he was going in for eye surgery, and they were just testing everyone before surgery. And my brother had to get tested because he works as a school crossing guard and came in close contact with someone, and just better safe than sorry. Thankfully, none of them had it, but I do have personal acquaintances who have come down with it. People in the community, people from church and stuff that have died from it. And also I had a friend from high school whose, I think it's her niece, got tested, and they didn't get the results for 2 weeks, and that's pretty ridiculous. So yeah, lots of issues. Lots of just stuff going on in the world. I just hope everyone's safe, and hopefully everyone, myself included, has a better evening, better day tomorrow, better rest of their holidays. Sadly, not much else we can do other than that. Um, so yeah, let's get into this game. I had mentioned earlier that this is a pretty short game. We're about 3 hours into it. It's about a 9-hour game. So we're probably gonna pass halfway through it today. Maybe even hit like 2/3. We'll have to see. Cool breeze helped abate the heat rushing through my body. That comfortable sensation also left me speechless. Rika-chan, who had been holding onto my sleeve the entire time, spoke.
僕の一番のお気に入りの場所なのですよ。
As she said that, she showed me another adorable smile. That smile seemed very fleeting. If you ask why, it was because the view from her favorite spot would eventually be submerged under the deep green waters of the dam reservoir.
こんな村が湖底に沈むことになってるなんて信じられないよ。
I said it quietly so only Rika-chan could hear it. I regretted it as soon as I did. Those words were all too cruel. However, Rika-chan didn't let them cast a cloud on her expression. In fact, she replied with a smile.
沈みませんよ。
I need to get work done for school. They're closing schools to the website. Will not be working for the next couple months. Yeah, my brother's in that boat. Like I said, he's a school crossing guard, so he's on Christmas break right now, but like he's not sure at this point, if he's going back in January, and if not, how long he'd be off. I'm guessing he wouldn't be paid if that happened, so he wouldn't be paid all that time. Yeah, schools are another another thing.
ダム計画なんて必ずなくなっちゃいますのです。
It was just like a little girl to say something like that. There was no basis for her saying so. It was just her wish.
赤坂はこの村が沈んでしまうと思っていますか？
沈んでほしくなんか。
Yeah, Samus's, please take care. Don't do something potentially dangerous. I mean, it doesn't really matter if it's physically dangerous or emotionally dangerous, electronically dangerous. I mean, as long as there's no risk of you like electrocuting yourself. I mean, I guess it's your money, but still be careful, please. Just a risk of losing some data. Have you backed up your data recently? Always a good thing. I say this as I almost never back up my data. The only things I really back up are pictures, because that's the only thing on my computer where it's like, if I lost this, it would, I would hate it, and all the rest is just like synced to Google Drive. I knew how important the dam was. I knew that it was necessary. Just didn't want to recognize the sacrifices that would be made. I agreed with the project in general, but couldn't agree with some of the details. But it meant that this girl's beloved scenery wouldn't be taken away from her. I might be able to object to the dam. I might be able to ignore the interests of the nation, the development of Japan, all for the sake of one girl's smile. I'm not really much of a humanist, but how sentimental of me.
沈みませんよ。ダムの計画はもうすぐなくなりますですから。
If it's all empty data, then it doesn't sound like it's that much of a risk. Her words weren't just hopes and dreams, but were seasoned with the hint of resolve. as if she was talking about an unchangeably predetermined outcome. As surely as the sun rising in the east.
なくなる?
Wanting to ask her why she believed that, I turned around.
はい。なくなりますのですよ。
どうして、そう言い切れるんだい?
それはなのです。
She seemed to want to answer, but as though unable to find the right word, she swallowed back what she was about to say.
赤坂が何をしてもしなくても、ダム計画は今年で終わりになってしまうのです。もう決まっていることなのですよ。
That was a lie. Something like that had already been decided. The Onikafuchi Defense Alliance would have no reason to continue existing. From my point of view, it's like they were doing nothing more than throwing themselves into an endless battle. They knew the dam project was cancelled. Feel much more relaxed around here. This village, though, could hardly be called relaxed. For evidence of that, I just had to remember how charged the atmosphere was at the checkpoint, or at the bus stop. The villagers, with their misplaced resolve, were still fighting. And this girl, even knowing the villagers' grim resolve, had already declared their victory. The villagers throwing themselves into this endless war, and this optimistic girl who said they had already won. That contrast was somehow strange.
どうしてそう思うんだい? 何か確信があるなら、私に教えてくれないかい?
Rika-chan stayed silent for a while, seemingly choosing what to say.
だって、
She looked like she was lost on whether she should continue or not. As if she was troubled on whether it was okay for her to say it, that kind of expression.
決まっていることなのです。他に言いようがないのですよ。
決まっているって、言ったって。
It really is just like a little girl to say something like that. I couldn't believe it was actually true. She was the only one saying such things with such confidence. My real mission, I had forgotten about during this fun-filled day, resurfaced at the back of my mind. The kidnapping of the minister's grandson. Had the Onikafuchi Defense Alliance kidnapped the minister's grandson? Already succeeded in negotiating the cancellation of the dam project? Did Kimiyoshi actually already know that and was just playing dumb? Was that what this girl was really telling me?
赤坂。
The girl called out my name suddenly.
東京へ帰れ。
Why does it have to sound like nails on a chalkboard? Huh? I wasn't only surprised at that sudden command. Ever since I came to this village, I'd never once mentioned I was from Tokyo. Well, based on my accent, she might have been able to guess where I was from. What was I getting so worked up over? It was probably the sudden and complete change in her demeanor.
あなたはさっさと東京に帰った方がいい。
And you know, her voice going all adult.
でないとひどく後悔することになる。
The girl had been holding my sleeve the entire time. She'd been tugging at my sleeve, and hurriedly dragging me over to show me this wonderful view. But this was the adorable Rika-chan, who I'd spent the entire day with. Yeah, I didn't know they had done it, but yeah, they were talking about renaming Master just because of master-slave kind of relationship stuff. They felt it was improper. I think they were going to rename it to Production, but don't quote me on that. But yeah, there was also a bunch of other ones that were looking to do the same thing. Like getting rid of the concept of whitelisting versus blacklisting, whereas blacklisting was bad and whitelisting was things you trust. Yeah, it's going to be a pain. It's going to break a whole lot of stuff. Yeah. Like overall, I think it's good. I think it's a good change. I just hope that they've thought this through and there's not going to be major issues. Like, yeah. There was no way she could have been replaced with a doppelganger when I wasn't looking. She had been holding on to my sleeve this entire time. But somehow this girl was someone other than Rika-chan. She looked like Rika-chan, but she wasn't. She was some girl I'd never met before. That girl had told me in an indifferent voice that I would eventually regret coming to this village from the bottom of my heart.
それがあまりにもみすぼらしくて気の毒な姿だから今のうちから警告してあげているのです。
I get where you're coming from, Samus's. I'm probably not the best person to comment on it as a person of great privilege. I don't see how it doesn't personally affect me, and I could see it being something that bothers others, and if it does, I think it should change. If it doesn't bother anyone, then maybe it's something that wasn't needed, but I don't think I'm in a position where I can say that.
どうして私が後悔することになると。
いちいちうるさいな。
Couldn't believe that I was hearing such cold words come from Rika-chan's mouth. Just couldn't believe it. Somebody impersonating her? Using ventriloquism or something? Thinking that, I wanted to take a look around, but the girl's gaze had me pinned down, making me unable to move.
あなたの親はあなたが赤信号の横断歩道の真ん中にいるときどうして危ないのかを全部説明し終えるまであなたの手を引っ張らないの。引っ張るでしょ。まず歩道まで連れ戻してからなぜ危険なのかを解くでしょう。つまりはそういうこと。
Girl I'd spent time with, Rika Furude, would not speak like that. She would speak with a cuteness befitting her age, with brief childish remarks, expressing her emotions honestly. She definitely wouldn't speak with such pointed words.
警告はした。
Oh yes, I have to see if... That does not look scary at all. That looks kind of scary. This just looks angry.
勘違いしないでほしいのは私があなたを嫌いだからこういうことを言ってるわけじゃないってこと。死んでもいい人に危険なんかを教える必要はないのだし。
君は誰だ。リカちゃんじゃない。
ん
As soon as I accused her of not being Rika-chan, she let out a strange, quiet giggle. It was a laugh not befitting of a child her age. It's like she was possessed by something. Actually, you look happy here. That's, no. Her change was just that total and complete. Was Rika-chan being attacked by some terrifying phenomenon? That occult idea came to mind without any sort of hesitation. Rika-chan is acting strange. Somebody, help. Thinking that I'd yell that, I turned to where the mayor was. Immediately, I realized he was looking at us with a smile. That's right, to him, it looked like nothing more than me and Rika-chan fooling around. He didn't notice that there was something terrifying happening to her.
赤坂の怖がり
Girl had obviously grasped that I was afraid. Noticing that and calling me a coward, she laughed again. That cackling girl, approaching me in a strange manner while still laughing, lost her balance and fell flat on her face. Rika-chan fell down. It was just a while before I would have extended a hand to help her up without hesitation. But now, extending a hand to this ominous girl who looked like Rika-chan but wasn't, required a bit more courage than I had at the moment.
Me.
Girl cried out thus. She then squirmed upright and dusted herself off. Afterwards, she looked around restlessly. A blank expression crept across her face. Gotta be kidding me. Was she making fun of me? That way of acting. It was as though, after being possessed by something, she'd lost her memories of what happened.
冗談だろ。リカ。ちゃん。
Me.
I don't know if Rika-chan had heard me or not. She just cried out like that as if questioning herself.
お客人リカちゃまもお茶が入りましたよ。塩大福もあるからにぜひ食ってきんさいな。
An old lady wearing a smock was waving energetically from the entrance of the office. Hearing that there were snacks, Rika-chan's expression changed.
はーいなのです。
Welcome back, Shy. You just missed her terrifying transformation. That's all. And then she face planted. A carefree smile. That was a familiar smile, the one that belonged to the embodiment of my ideal daughter. Any hint of the creepy girl that was just there, spouting sinister words, had vanished.
ほらリカちゃま手を洗ってきんさいね。バッチおててにゃ食わせるまんじゅうありんせんね。ちゃんと洗いますですよ。
Chan responded with vigor, running off to the washing station that was along the side of the office. She stopped halfway, turning around to call to me.
早く来ないから僕は赤坂の分までおまんじゅうが食べられてホクホクなのです。
ああ。
お手手を洗わない人はおまんじゅうが食べられないのですよ。
No matter how you looked at it, that was Rika-chan. Those words, the way she said them, no matter how you heard them, they were definitely Rika-chan's.
ほんでお客人大人なんだからお手本を示してやってくださいな。
The old lady urged me to wash my hands. Without any resistance, I lined up beside Rika-chan at the wash station. Splish splash. Stared at Rika-chan, intent on washing her hands properly, like she had learned at school.
みー、間違っていますか？
間違いって。
僕のお手手の洗い方です。金シールを4個しかもらったことないです。
Wait, you get gold stickers for washing your hands? And let alone you get 4?
僕はお手手を洗うのがきっと下手なのですよ。
間違ってなんかないよ。それだけしっかり洗えてれば十分だよ。
それだけではダメなのですよ、赤坂。ちゃんとたわしを使って爪の間の赤も落とさないと金シールはもらえないのです。
うん。リカちゃんは真面目で偉いな。
ニパー、赤坂に褒められましたのです。
No matter how you looked at it, it was Rika-chan. There was no trace of that girl from before. Exactly what was that sinister
Rika-chan.
girl?
さっきのあれはどういう意味だい？ さっきリカちゃんは私に、東京へ帰れって、そう言っただろ。
言いましたのですか？
I was at a loss for words. He didn't remember what that girl just now had said. Could ever believe something as occult as that could happen? Could ever believe that Rika-chan could be possessed by that strange girl and say those creepy things?
リカちゃんが、確かにそう言ったよ。
めー。
Her expression told me that. Despite my saying so, she had no idea. She wasn't playing dumb. She actually didn't know. Exactly what was that just now? Just as Rika-chan had, I let a look of confusion creep across my face. The two of us, looking like we had no idea what was going on, must have certainly been a humorous sight to behold. While partaking of tea and snacks, I was shown a propaganda film shot by the Defense Alliance that highlighted their resistance efforts. Older folks talked passionately on how long and grueling the fight against the dam was. They fell on deaf ears. I was transfixed by Rika-chan, who had heard these stories countless times before and was nodding off. Eventually, Rika-chan noticed I was staring at her and smiled as she rubbed her eyes. That smile was Rika-chan's after all. There was no hint of that sinister shadow. After that, my unreasonable fear of Rika-chan lessened with the passing of time, but I could by no means forget what had happened. It eventually grew dark. The mayor said they had to prepare dinner. I said I would come again tomorrow and took my leave. I had to return to the hotel and file my regular report with the section chief.
そうですか。では、また明日もぜひいらっしゃい。お電話さくれれば、すぐに迎えを出しますんでね。
ご好意感謝します。ぜひ明日も遊びに来ようと思います。
ええ、さしてあげてくださいな。あんた、リカちゃまに大層気に入られたみたいだしね。
赤坂は明日も来ますですか？明日は5次元で終わりですから、3時くらいに来てくれると嬉しいのですよ。
Please come again. Here a smile urged me to do so. There wasn't a trace of that evil aura. Depending on what happened next, all that might end up as nothing other than my hallucination. Thinking about it logically, the daughter of the Furude household, one of the three families, had taken a liking to me, and this was a strong foothold for my investigation from here on out. It's like a free ticket for a reason to visit Hinamizawa. I could only treat that little incident as a figment of my imagination. Having this girl, who was the embodiment of my ideal daughter, were so attached to me, wasn't bad either. I had successfully dove into the belly of the Onikafuchi Defense Alliance. I had the mayor as well as other important members of the alliance welcome me with open arms. This was a great turn of events. However, I still felt uneasy. Getting back to the hotel, I forced down an almost painfully cold beer until I could clear my mind. Shock from that incomprehensibly strange incident continued to torment me. Got our first taste of creepy weirdness. Oh, and that's the end of chapter 2. So based on my knowledge, we're now halfway through the game. Usually the first few bits are faster. Or maybe it was 6 chapters. Maybe that's why it seems like it's going so fast. We're going to look at the new tips. We got 3. Go from left to right. First we have going smoothly. I can see streams hiccuping a little bit. It seems like it's back. The sound of the car grew closer, followed by the sound of it braking as the engine cut out. That moment, His up until now lackadaisical footsteps grew decisive as the man in the room dashed up the wall beside the window and carefully peered outside. It was his comrade's car. Doesn't he streams being a bit weird? I'm just looking to see why. Something's using up my internet bandwidth. What is it? Antivirus software, this is not the time to update. Thank you very much. Give me 1 second to tell my antivirus software to cut that out. Why did you choose to do this now, antivirus software? You won't let me kill you. Why are you being a pain? It's being a bigger pain than I would wish. Give me 1 second. Okay, I think it finished being a pain. Let me just see if I can stop it from doing that again. Okay. I think that's as good as I'm gonna get it. Okay, so sorry about that. My antivirus software decided it was the perfect time to run a full system scan, even though I've told it not to. It's been very bad. I'll have to have some words with it later. But I think we're good now. Okay. Okay, so hopefully that's good now. OBS is telling me it's fine. Let's hope it doesn't come back. Even so, he still didn't relax his guard. Eventually, the sound of footsteps approached the door. Thump, 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 thump. It was the passcode.
帰ってきたんね。開けちょくれな。俺だ。ああ、お疲れ。今開ける。
The locks were undone and the door opened. A man appeared, arms laden with swollen plastic grocery bags. Bags in his hands had Sevens Mart written on them, bread and milk cartons able to be glimpsed within. Contents of those bags were then spread over a sheet on the
カップラー
floor.
メン買ってきちゃう。お湯沸かせな。小僧はどうしてる？ん？ずっと寝てる。手がかからなくて助かるよ。うんこ垂れるときは騒ぐけどな。漏らさせんな。弁臭は万一のとき、やばいって。わかってるよ。猿グツワは定期的にチェックんな。外れてもまずいん。きつくも締め付けちゃあん。窒息させたら意味がなん。わかってるって。あれ、携帯コンロのガス管頼まなかった？もうガスねえよ。聞いてねえ。だは。マジかよ。ついてくれよ。くそ、くそ。
He rattled the portable stove as he struggled to get it to light. Seeing that, the man who went to buy supplies let out a deep sigh. A backward glance at that sight began to walk to the corner of the room. The kidnapped boy was sprawled out on a sheet that was spread out on the floor.
小僧、元気かいね。
Of course, the man didn't assume the kid was able to hear that question. That was because the boy's ears were plugged, his eyes and ears thoroughly covered by packing tape. Also, his mouth was gagged with a thin, twisted-up towel. Because of that, the boy was unable to close his mouth properly, his cheeks sticky with his own saliva. Of course, that wasn't the only reason. Both his arms were tied tightly behind his back with a leather
今ん
belt.
ところ順調らし。命の心配はない。お前のじいさんがしぶりよったん。耳たぶの一つも切り落とさなきゃならんかったんけ。やらんくて済んで助かりよんよ。本家はこうと決めたら鬼やんね。どんな残酷なこと命令するかも想像つかん。その本家が小僧に傷一つつけるな言うてんから、とにかく順調なんだろんな。大臣はダム計画を撤回で水面下工作。ひなみ沢ダム計画は無期凍結へ。小僧の解放はいつ頃になるんだろうな。早く一服したいもんだぜ。
Okay, so this basically just confirmed that the town are the people who kidnapped him, and they're getting their way.
本家が決着のタイミング測ってるらしい。いつになるかはあらんが、近いうちやんな。
The main family probably being the Sonozaki family.
よかったな、小僧。もうじき解放されるぞ。
The men didn't know if their voices were heard by the boy. For him, there was nothing he could do but continue to sleep to escape his harsh reality.
それよん、ガスをどうするんね。ラーメン食えんよ。ガス切れたなら言うてえな、もう。
Alright, so that was going smoothly. Next we have Why I Like Rainy Days, even though the sky looks perfectly clear. The weather forecast had predicted that it wouldn't rain at all this entire week. Not that I hate sunny days or anything. Every day is the same, unchanging, sunny weather, however. Anybody would long for a rain cloud or two. If it's simply clear skies for a week, a month, a year, anybody would long for a rain cloud or two. The weather specialist said they had carefully scrutinized a large quantity of past data, so it wouldn't be so likely for the forecast to be wrong. I knew as much, but even then, there was occasionally a day where I was hoping that it would be wrong. I stared into the clear blue sky. Was I being mischievous in hoping so? I waited and waited, feeling almost suffocated by the boring blue sky, undisturbed by a single cloud. Yeah, none of these things are clouds. I don't know what they are, but they're not clouds. You could die from that suffocating feeling, and the population of Earth probably wouldn't have increased to this point. In other words, the only person who was being suffocated by this was me. And so, I welcomed the summer evenings, where not even the weather forecast could predict a sudden shower. If I were to explain it like this, would you understand a bit more about how I feel? Let's say that tonight's dinner was going to be curry rice. When you're called down to the dinner table, what was waiting for you was instead an eggplant and bell pepper stir-fry. This is just on your mother's whim, by the way. I would be delighted by such whimsy. I don't really like eggplants or bell peppers, but still, I would be delighted. The fact that the pre-established routine of curry rice had been broken would be amusing. Tonight was repeated 100 times, and 100 times you had to eat curry rice. Yet for just this one night, that was changed to an eggplant and bell pepper stir-fry. There's no way you couldn't enjoy that chance happening. I hate pre-established routines. I really hate when things are all decided beforehand. I have no love for boredom. I always get my hopes up that something today will be different from yesterday, no matter how trivial. It's been decided that this entire week, starting today, was going to be clear skies. The weather forecast decided upon it, so the god of weather must also feel obliged to do so. But who's to say that a rain cloud might not just show up one day on a whim? It's something that nobody can say for sure, because that thought remains in this world. A creature such as myself can continue living without being suffocated. Tomorrow will probably be a hot and clear day. However, I'm the only one that knows that predetermined fate, even with but a slim 1% chance, sometimes changes. Hoping for that 1%, I hung upside down weather charts on my sunlit eaves trough. The end. I spend my days waiting for those unexpected things in life to happen. I pondered why I was hoping for it. Why was I hoping for a rain cloud? The answer is simple. I had my fill of clear skies. Why was I hoping for a rain cloud? The answer was simple. The fact that it was going to be sunny tomorrow was boring. So why was I hoping for a rain cloud? In the end, it doesn't really matter whether it rains or shines tomorrow. Basically, it was just that the rain would water my heart. It was withered from boredom. That's why rather than a TV drama where the plot's already been decided, I prefer to look up at the sky. How has the GitHub change made your life more difficult, Samus? I thought of like a couple things if you had some kind of build pipeline pulling from specific branches or merging into specific branches, you might have issues there. I hadn't really thought past that though, to be entirely honest. And we have our last tip, which is barley tea and black tea and a millstone, and I see some familiar faces in this one.
だいぶ血圧も良くなってきましたよ。そのお年でこれだけの回復力があるのは、いやいや、感服するばかりです。 おりょうさんなら100でも200でも元気にお過ごしになれますね。
The young doctor in his medical coat said that as he undid the blood pressure cuff from the arm of the old woman tucked away in her futon.
入江の先生は本に
I don't know if we've ever seen her before.
身体な死に損ないは早うしなんと若者の邪魔になっていけんね。
She only has this art. Currently defaults to the main branch to masters, so now there's a discrepancy. These are the kinds of things, yeah, that I wish they had fixed. Like, I knew there was going to be some things they couldn't control, like if you were using some third-party build pipeline, they would have to change too. But being able to just now reference master and production should have been something they could have done. The old lady, Oreo, laughed faintly with a broad smile on her face. Then turning towards the sliding door, she called out in a strong
しみ
voice.
こさん、かたえこさんおらんね。入江先生に麦茶でも入れてやりゃな。
Sound of rushed footsteps from the hallway drew closer, till finally the door slid smoothly open. What it revealed was a young girl. Looked like the old lady's granddaughter.
シミコさんは今日はもう上がっちゃったよ。何かよ。
みよ、入江の先生に麦茶を入れたってんな。
Now that's a different color shirt for Mion. Oh, that's actually a nice one. She looks very young there, just in her hoodie, looking very comfy.
うん、了解。抹茶も飲む？紅茶の方がいい？砂糖もミルクもたっぷり？
わしが加減するから入れんでええんねん。砂糖壺とミルクも一緒に持ってきてんな。
はいはい。
The girl named Mion, to giving a rather uninterested response to her taskmaster of a grandmother, returned to the hallway.
先生の麦茶は来客用のガラスジャーに入れるんよ。ちゃんとお座布団もつけてな。水滴もちゃんと拭き取っとくんね。
待ってるってうっさいな。
A tired voice wafted a reply from down the hallway. The apathetic tone of voice was far from unusual. The old lady let a wry smile slip across her face as she chided the girl.
しょうがないやっちゃな。叱られるうちがはなんねえ、なんたく。
おりょうさん、まあ、そこまでは言わなくても、みおんちゃんも若いなりに頑張ってますから。
あれの母親もな、しょうがないやっちゃったんね。よう似とる。
で、その母親の母親もまたそっくりなんじゃないですか？
The old lady burst out laughing. Her expression showed she hadn't taken the comment the wrong
入江
way.
先生、申し訳ない。症状はっけてもらえんけんね。風が涼しそうだわ。
Cool chirping of the Higurashi had at some point started leaking through the gap in the doorway. Yurie stood up and opened the door a bit. Just a little bit, you know, not all the way, just a very tiny bit. A refreshing breeze pushed out the stale air that had built up in the room.
日中はだいぶ暑くなったように思うんですが、まだ朝夕は涼しいですね。夕べは少し肌寒いくらいでした。
そんな朝夕もまた、ひなみ沢のいいところな。
Yurie replied with a smile as he returned to sit on the cushion beside the old lady. And the two of them, for a little while, soaked in the voices of the Higurashi.
わしゃ100まで生きにせ。もうしばらくは死ねんよ。ダムの件、 きっちり蹴りつけるまでは勘の蓋かって収まらんわ。
This woman's trying to live to 100, meanwhile I'm here like, I hope I just like, live to 75, 80.
国が一度決めたことを撤回するのはなかなか難しいでしょうね。
国のやることはな、いつの世もイシュース回すみたいなもんね。そんでもだいぶ重いやっちゃ。
石臼ですか？
知らんねか、イシュース。
Uriei quickly affirmed that of course he knew what the old lady was talking about, for he knew full well that Oryu didn't like having her stories
国
interrupted.
のイシュースはな、なんでもゴリゴリ引いちまう。大したもんよ。でもな、簡単には回らない。重いイシュースなんねんな。たくさんの人間がせーのってやってようやくじりじりと動き出す。そんなイシュースなんよ。
Uriei pursed his lips, listening quietly to what she was saying. Eventually, Mion returned with some tea laid out on a tray. Seeing that Oryu was talking and in a good mood, she quietly knelt down and laid out the sets of the barley and black tea, careful not to interrupt.
だから一度回り始めたら簡単には止められんね。回し始める一番初めが一番重い。それが嫌だからみんな手を休めんとゴリゴリ回し続けるんね。
摩擦係数の話でしょ。確かにバッチャの話、理屈はあるね。
ちゅうことはだ。何かの間違いで突然イシュースが止まっちまったら、また回すにゃどえらい力がかかる。ちゅうこったな。
確かに一度中断した計画をもう一度動かすのに必要なエネルギーはかなりのものでしょうね。
簡単には止められんイシュースだけどな。一度止めれば二度とは回らん。そういうイシュースよ。
石臼を止めるいい手があればいいんですがね。
Uriei responded with that. Mion and the old lady suddenly sunk into silence. Uriei, instinctively thinking he had said something rude, searched in a small panic for the words to correct himself. That silence wasn't the result of rude words. What crept across Mion and the old lady's faces were contemptuous smiles. Do you look creepy? Eh. Yeah, you do look creepier in the second one. The atmosphere surrounding Irie suddenly froze, leaving him flabbergasted. Thinking that the scornful smiles creeping across both their faces was the result of some mistake of his, he could only grow afraid. It hadn't been that long at all since he was enveloped by silence. However, unable to stand it, Irie could only let out a weak laugh. Irie's laugh eventually spread to Mion and the old lady. Not knowing exactly what they were laughing at, the laughter left a lingering chill. The only ones not laughing were the Higurashi, who continued their simple and unchanging chorus. Okay, those were all the tips after Chapter 2. We'll do the thing where we save the game, because we finished a chapter. And then we will do the thing where we continue the game, because we are not done yet. Every time that phone rings, I swear I think it's my phone. The phone suddenly rang. I woke up in a hurry. Clock read 9 p.m.
しまった。定時連絡の時間を寝過ごした。
A picked up the receiver.
赤坂様、外線からお電話が入っておりますが、おつなぎしてもよろしいでしょうか。ご同僚の加納様と申されております。
I knew it. I didn't call in, so they had phoned
すみ
me.
ません。つないでください。
かしこまりました。おつなぎしますので、一度受話器を置いてお待ちください。
After I'd put down the receiver for a few seconds, the phone began to ring again.
はい、もしもし。赤坂です。
赤坂くん？加納です。お疲れ様。定時連絡がなかったので、こちらからかけました。そちらの状況はどう？
Leaving the lecture for later, my senior coworker got straight to the point.
ひなみ沢村へ実島に行きました。観光客を装うことで、村長以下の何人かの死守同盟の要人との接触に成功。何も聞き出すには至りませんでしたが、好印象を得て、明日以降へのつなぎを作ることができました。
そう。なかなか手際がいいね。赤坂くんのどこか初々しい感じが、むしろ武器になったのかもしれないね。まずは上守備ってところかな。
比較するほど経験がないので、上守備かはわかりませんが、とりあえず、今日のところは順調だと思います。
県警での情報や地元警察の公安での情報と照らしてどう？鬼ヶ淵死守同盟は白っぽい？
I still didn't know. I should have been able to say that immediately. I only had to say that, but for some reason I hesitated.
まだ調査中ですので、なんとも。
そう。なるべく早めにね。わかってると思うけど、今夜が終われば、誘拐から丸4日が経過する。いつが時間切れという明白な区切りはないけど、時間の経過は確実に我々の状況を不利にしていく。それは分かってるよね。
ええ、分かっています。迅速に。だけれど、細心の注意で調査を続けます。
うん。くれぐれも気をつけてね。相手は暴力主義団体なんだから。油断すれば危険もあり得るからね。危険が迫ったらすぐに連絡を。その場合は地元公安に応援体制を入れられるようにするからね。
ありがとうございます。頑張ります。
他に赤坂くんの方から連絡はある？
I reported several bits of supplementary information. At the very end I decided
そ
to
ちらの
ask.
調査の進展はどうですか？
うん。こっちもみんな頑張ってるけど、なかなかはかどらないよ。何しろ、調べる団体が星の数だからね。だから、君の方の団体も白だと分かったらすぐに帰郷して、他の職員の応援に入ってもらいたいんだよ。室長は、鬼ヶ淵も洗っとけって言ってるけど、俺は鬼ヶ淵なんかの反ダム住民団体なんかは、今回の件、全く無縁だと思ってるからね。職員一人を一団体調べさせるためだけに出張させるのは、すごく痛いよ、ほんと。
At this point he was just complaining, telling me to stop taking my time enjoying my trip, to finish up and get back
なるべ
quickly.
く早めにケリをつけるようにします。
うん、よろしくね。じゃあ、他に何もなければ切るよ。
はい。特にありません。
As we were ending our call, he scolded me thoroughly for being late with my regular report. After that, I hung up the phone and sprawled out on the bed. Come to think of it, I hadn't heard anything from Oishi. So as to contact me about a time and place to meet with the informant tonight. Thought about getting angry with Oishi in retaliation for being scolded for forgetting my daily report. Come to think of it, though, Oishi didn't really say anything other than he was going to call tonight. Waiting for a phone call when he didn't know what time it was going to come was, in itself, rather difficult. Just when I thought that, the phone rang. Picked up the receiver in a hurry.
もしもし。
これはびっくりしました。赤坂さん、あなた受話器取るの早いですね。警官辞めても大企業の営業で十分飯が食えますよ。
まだ警官辞めた後のことなんか考えたこともありません。
そこまで過剰に反応されると、お前しかしいけないな。因果な商売ですし、今から考えても遅くないですよ。
I don't like where this I know exactly where this conversation's going.
遠慮いたしますので、本題に入ってください、大石さん。
But do I get the feeling we're gonna go there anyways?
それは残念です。じゃあ老後の話は次の機会にでも。では本題に。
Many of the executives in the Onigafuchi Defense Alliance have a lot of sway in the neighboring regions. Apparently a really nice smooth jazz track, too. Even in Okonomiya, there were a lot of people with relations in the village. That's why meeting in the Shishibone Market District, far from Okonomiya, was a matter of course.
赤坂さん、こっちこっち。ちょっと迷いましたか。北口からの方が遠回りだけど、道は分かりやすかったかもしれませんね。
いえ、遅れて申し訳ありませんでした。
夕飯はもう食べちゃいました？
ええ、済ませてあります。
じゃあ、お酒の飲めるお店に行きましょうか。洋酒派？日本酒派？女の子のいる店といない店はどっちがいいですかね。
お構いなく、勤務中は飲みませんので。
Hearing that, the man that Oishi had brought along bent backwards as he guffawed, clapping Oishi on the shoulder.
ねえ、初々しい人でしょ。その分ちょっぴりサービスしてあげてくださいよ。あのお金は全部彼のお財布から出てるんですからね。
The man that Oishi had brought seemed almost like a ticket scalper or a bookie. Even his appearance was dubious. We don't have an appearance for him, so I don't know he's dubious. I mean, maybe he's a ghost. Ghosts can be pretty dubious. The informant grinned deviously.
おい、坊主。お前旦那にいくら渡した？だいぶ途中でつまみ食いされてんぞ。
大石氏への仲介手数料も含めていますから、それも含んだ上です。
When I responded matter-of-factly, he realized that I was an entirely different type of person than he was. Rather than putting a distance between us, it seemed that I had piqued his interest.
だから言ったでしょ。真面目な人なんです。でもね、赤坂さん、私たちのような職種の人間は豊富な社会経験がとても武器になるんですよ。
女の子がいてお酒が飲めるお店での経験がどう武器になるか疑問です。
The informant, unable to contain himself, clutched his stomach as he guffawed, heedless of the people watching.
もう赤坂さんはいちいち察しがいいな。よっ、さすが高学歴。
大石さん、あなたどこかで飲んできましたね。酔っ払ってます。
オフタイムに飲んで何が悪いんですか？あなたは勤務中でも私はオフ。オフ。
Oishi, who's the sort that'd fool around to begin with, was in such a good mood, I couldn't figure out a way to deal with him. Completely different than me, who had come worried about getting every bit of information I could. Oishi-san. Taking so much money, you're supposed to get me information worth at least as much. I thought this, but then realized I was getting my information from the informant. It didn't matter how drunk Oishi was. There was nothing I could complain about, but I still felt slightly riled up. Oishi and the informant was no doubt a fake name, but he introduced himself as Sato, led the way deeper and deeper into the back streets of the market district. Even though the market was bustling, a couple of turns off the main street and you were in a desolate alleyway. Oishi started climbing a set of stairs on the side of a seedy building. There wasn't any sort of signage, so I couldn't tell if the place was open, or if it was even a store at all.
安心してください。怪しい店じゃありませんよ。
I'm sorry, someone says, don't worry, this place isn't dubious. It's probably dubious. Those words, coming from Oishi's mouth, had absolutely no credibility. Beyond the door was thankfully a typical Mahjong parlor. I was relieved that it wasn't the sort of suspicious place I had to be on my guard about.
いらっしゃい。あら、
大石さん、お久しぶり。こっち入ります？すぐ開きますよ。
いいえ。今日はセットですからいいです。お、待たせましたね。
Mahjong is a game played with 4 people. It seems that a middle-aged man who's going to be our 4th had already arrived and was waiting for
遅え
us.
ぞクラウド。俺はもう消えろと思ってたんだから。
Oishi made an excuse for why we had taken so long. Eventually realizing that I was a new face, the other man grew interested.
彼は赤坂さん。東京からはるばる出張されてきた将来有望な新人さんです。
坊主、お前麻雀はできんのか？
まあ、学生時代にそこそこに。
Sato and the old man cackled in unison. Their plot to sucker me out of my money was painfully obvious.
緊張続きの出張で疲れておいでだろうと思いましてね。一つ今夜は心の選択でもして差し上げましょうかと思いまして。
今さら野暮なことを聞きますが、私たち警察官ですよね。
まあそれはいい子なしで。なーに、実際にはかけるわけじゃありませんよ。
Won't actually gamble anything. Sounds like you're gonna figuratively gamble something.
この後いいお店に遊びに行くときに誰が全員分を払うのか決めるだけですって。
I mean, that's just as bad, if not worse.
遊びに行く？どんな店に遊びに行くんですか？
Without reservation, the 3 of them started suggesting places like cabarets, high-class clubs, and even brothels. At the very least, they were the types of places that you couldn't go to without money. That was just for funsies.
私のお金は先日、大石さんに根こそぎ預けて、支払いは不可能ですし、仕事の都合があるので、長居はできないのですが。
じゃあ、坊主が勝てばいいじゃねえかよ。おめえが勝ったら、この雀荘の支払いはなしで、クラウドに仕事の話でも何でもすればいい。
No matter what happened, it seemed like they were intent on playing Mahjong for free. I have to fasten my resolve a bit. I was going to be underestimated like this forever. It was going to get in the way of my
わ
work.
かりました。では、少しだけお付き合いします。私が勝ったら、アフターの遊びは一切なしで、すぐに仕事の話に入ってもらいますからね。
いいですとも。
俺が勝ったらフラワーのブルーマーメイドに直行だからね。
おやっさんも好きだな。私はもちろん馴染みの店をはしごしまくりですよ。あっけみちゃん。佐藤さんはどうします？
私は静かに飲めるお店でいいですよ。
静かにバニーさんとでしょ。この間飲みに行った時、あんたバニーさんの尻尾を引っ込めちゃったでしょ。あれ結局弁償だったの？
マスターに縫製代とか言われて一本ドンペリ開けられたな。
What a lively table this was. I could tell the other customers were glaring at us while we loudly continued our crude conversation. Speaking of which, the fact that they had assumed I was the same was a bit disheartening. Oishi had taken all the money I'd brought, so everything I had left was out of my own pocket. In addition, there wasn't much left of that either. If I kept on hanging around him like this, through his goading, my wallet would disappear into the night. I had to somehow win and return the conversation to my job. These people, no matter how you looked at it, were pretty good. Sorry, Yuki.
そんじゃこれでリーチッと。
Okay, I will say right now, I know very little about Mahjong. There's different So for people who don't know Mahjong, you have a bunch of tiles. I think you have 12 in front of you, and then there's a big stack in the middle. And you're trying to get, like, pairs, trios, stuff in a row. There's other matching things, and depending on what you have, you can declare you're at different stages. So Ricci is one of them. And there's certain ones where if you get to it, it finishes, and you tally up points. That's about all of my understanding of Mahjong, and it is very limited. Well, the old man and Sato-san probably won't fall for the silly Ricci. Wonder if Asaka-san would spit out what I needed. But I don't think you actually have to declare it, so if you have something, you don't have to declare it, I think is how it works. Oh, the old man's pretty good. Quietly trying to use one of my save tiles to complete his hand, isn't he? It seems that Akasa-kun has at least learned the ropes when it comes to guarding against someone's Ricci. That will be his downfall. So, Kasaka-kun's really fretting over this one. It's glaringly obvious that he had a safe tile to discard. He didn't want to throw it away because it would move him farther from completing his hand. They're so nice when they're young and innocent. Come on, hurry up and throw out the kicker. Gave me the winning tile, we'd be headed to an establishment where I could do all sorts of licking and sucking. I need to play different games. He gives the old man his winning tile, then we'd be headed straight to the place, Maids and Bloomers. He looked up as he hesitantly threw out a tile that was... oh, too bad. Seems this time you were lucky. As long as the round kept going, I could still win off the draw. But after that, Akasaka-kun managed to luckily avoid throwing any bad tiles. Somehow, the round managed to end without anybody completing a hand. Sato-san had keenly anticipated that two players were in Ricci and decided to play it safe. What a cool-headed way of playing. Now, let's see what kind of hand did Akasaka-kun have. And the round ends with nobody winning in Mahjong. Anybody in Tenpai has to show their hand. But if you're not in Tenpai, you have no obligation to reveal it. Your average beginner would normally show their hand even if they weren't in Tenpai, start a commotion about how if this tile or that tile came, they would be in Tenpai. But he didn't. Being stingy? Sato-san reached over to flip the hand that Akasaka-kun had casually placed face down. He was nowhere near Tenpai. Akasaka-kun totally bad at this after all? Right then, as the old man compared the tiles from Akasaka-kun's hand, discard pool, puzzled expression crossed his face.
マンズの高いあたりが急に高騰しましたので抑えました。大石さんのリーチに対して安全性が高まったのにです。筋でさばけば無難なのにわざわざ抑えた方がいる。
おお、クラウドのテンパイなど鼻から論外っていうわけか。
相当高度な引っ掛けでなければ私の宝珠を期待したぬるめの手かと思って。それよりもダマで張ったあなたの方がとりあえずは問題でした。
いつテンパイしたのに気づいた。
この辺りですか。ノンタイムで4連続で切ってますよね。初めは食い替えかと思いましたが私をチラチラ見ていたので期待しているんだと気づきました。
Akasaka-kun, you...
赤坂さん、あんた麻雀始めてどのくらい？
高校から大学くらいまでの間しかやっていませんよ。さあ続けましょう。佐藤さんはテンパイしなかったから流れて、次は私ですね。親。
Seems like Akasaka-kun is really aware of how the game flows. We thought we were just gonna eat him alive, but it looks like this isn't gonna be so easy.
大石さん、想図が濃すいですね。回しますか？
この坊主。
I think this is also the first time we've actually seen the main character. Maybe at the airport we saw him too.
クラウド、降りるな。
あと3つ。いい牌が来ればな。佐藤さんはうまくいきそうです。
くそ、食いたんで引きずり下ろすか。チーだ。
チーですか。じゃあすみません。それポンです。
Oh, now gonna call 3 of a kind after he declared a straight? Trying to override and interfere?
坊主、おめえ離れしとるな。
まさか私が生まれる前から打ってるような方々とは比べようもないですよ。あ、それです。どうも。トイトイ赤赤トラさん。親ですからね。ちょっぴり高いですよ。
くわっ。
I love how he goes from, oh, there's no way I could win, to, oh, also I just won.
赤坂さんやるな。こりゃ我々も本気を出さないと。ねえ。
本気のついでに展望も出してもらいましょうかね。私は眠いんで、手っ取り早く終わらせます。
Akasaka-kun? This is somehow unreal. Before I could realize it, there was an ominous, cold air emitting from beneath Akasaka-kun's feet.
ぬるいですね。マンズのリャンウーパーが笑ってませんか？
ちくしょう。坊主てめえ。
クラウド、お前差し込め。坊主の親、とっとと下ろすだ。
悔しいですが、どうやらそうした方が賢明なようですね。出た。ローだ。はいよ、ドライチ。
すみませんね。頭っ鼻です。どうも、ピンフ。
頭っぱねだ。小僧のくせに。
小僧が相手だとバカバカしくて手を緩むってわけですか。じゃああんたその小僧以下ってわけですね。面白いなあ。あんたら連中は決まって小僧だ坊主だって言うよ。
あ、赤坂くん。赤坂くんですよね。なんだかムードが変わりまくりなんですがね。
私をかもって今晩はいいお酒を飲むおつもりだったんでしょうが、どうやら皆さんの当ては外れそうです。あ、単品3色赤1ドラ1。
おお、張ってやがったか。
だからあんたぬるいよ。いくらダマだからってこんなにぬるい三面なんだから読んでくれなくっちゃ。
Akasaka-kun chuckled as he rested his chin in his hands. That pose was so fitting, it was almost scary.
おいクラウド、話がちげえぞ。初々しいカモがネギ背負ってきたって言ったのは誰だ。
いや
I do wish I knew more about Mahjong to follow this, but sadly I do
誰
not.
でしょうね。
おいさ、まずいよ。このままじゃ負けるよ、マジで。
Akasaka-kun, for you to make me get serious. Looks like you really want to be milked dry.
ポン気前がいいですね。もう一回ポンです。
Akasaka-kun was almost singing at this point. The tiles he had open were all pin tiles. Can't be serious. Are you really going for the flush?
坊主、正気か？4つもさらしたらおめえパイが1つだけじゃねえかよ。
そうですね。知ってます？短期待ちって 一番読まれにくいらしいですよ。
バカかてめえ。そこまで染めて晒しといて今更出ると思うんじゃね
読めてますよ赤坂さん。それ均一でも本一でもないんでしょう。4つポンした時点でトイトイは成立してますからね。あんた今絶好の単独トップ。こいつは均一と見せかけでトイトイで食おうという挑発手でしょう。
そう思うならピンズ切ってみます？大石さんの肺の左5つ、さっきから切り損ねてるピンズですよね。それを端から順に切ってみたらいいんじゃないですか？
Must be joking. Is he a Mahjong god? No, he had to be the main character of a manga or something. That moment, the old man sent me a sign under the table. The message was simple and clear.
やれ、叩き潰せ。こんな若い子に様は好きじゃないんですがね。あう、ここまで舐められて今さら引けるか。
I want to imagine that the two police officers just like ducked under the table and are having this conversation while the other two watch.
もう知りませんよ。ではどうぞ。
行くぞ坊主。リーチだ。オープンで行くぞ。ピンズの一数値待ちだ。
Most likely the tile that Akasaka-kun was waiting for was one of those tiles. This Akasaka-kun was no longer capable of winning the hand. When I drew from the wall, switched out the tile that Akasaka-kun would draw. The tile that I put in was the 1 pin. One of the tiles that the old man was waiting on. Akasaka-kun discarded it a little while ago, so there's no threat of it being the one he needed.
おい、坊主の番だぜ。
I knew he was troubled that the tile he drew was the 1 pin. Of course he couldn't discard
坊
it.
主、分かってると思うが、オープンリーチに振り込んだら100万払いだぜ。
言われるまでもありませんよ。
The tile that came from Akasaka-kun's hand was an honor tile. Ooh, ain't that something. There's only one north wind tile left, isn't there? You were counting on a really rough wait, weren't you? But with this, Akasaka-kun's fate was decided.
カズ、命拾いしたな。だが、手配は1名だ。逃げきれなくなることもあるんじゃねえのか？
やっぱりそういうことか。
He looks like he's doing pretty fine. Akasaka-kun glared at the old man with a discerning eye. This guy had pretty good instincts. Did he figure out we were
や
cheating?
めましょうよ、やっさん。赤坂君の方が2、3枚は上手です。
バル、ここまで来てやめられるか。次行け、捕ませちまえ。
Next tile Akasaka-kun would draw was the 7 pin. That, it would be settled. No matter which one he discarded, he'd play right into the old man's hand. An unavoidable full payout. When I drew my tile, I sneakily swapped Akasaka-san's. Crash. What? Akasaka-kun suddenly sneezed, collapsing the wall of tiles in front of him.
おいおい、何やってんだ。
すみません。ついくしゃみをした拍子に山を崩しちゃって。バップ払いですね。親だから4000オールですか？それとも、バップは積み棒に？
Unable to hold back, I guffawed. Akasaka-kun, knowing he was going to be cornered a second time and unable to escape, took the drastic measure of knocking over his own wall.
やるなあ、坊主。100万払いをそういう手で防ぐとはな。ガッハハハハ。
大石さんも、そんな見え見えの積み込みは勘弁してください。これが馬場なら、今ので卓をひっくり返してたところですよ。
いえいえいえいえいえいえ。すみませんすみません。 あなたを侮っていましたよ。あなたどうしてお強いじゃないですか。
正直に話さんかい。若い頃はだいぶ慣らしたんだろ。
早稲田高田の馬場あたりでだいぶ遊ばせてもらいました。ちょっと勝ちまくりすぎて馴染みの店に出禁を食らいまして、今の家内にだいぶ怒られて足を洗ったんです。
勝ちまくりすぎて？あんた当時はどのくらいの勝率でやってたの？
メンツにもよりましたが、歌舞伎町あたりで打つときはほぼ負けなしでした。特に相手があれ系の人の時は命かかってましたからね。
20 times? What kind of stakes were those? Did you have Hikusa at your table? Pro baseball players?
なんだクラウド、このタク、お前どっからこんなプロ雀士みたいなの引っ張ってきたんだ。もうやめだやめ。ああもう坊主、おめえの勝ちだ。降参。
ありがとうございます。光栄です。
いやしかし赤坂さん、あんた打つと性格変わるね。なんで就職なんかしたの？あんたならフリーで十分に飯食っていけるじゃない。
プロ雀士には腕と突きの両方が必要なんですよ。私には後者がありませんでしたから。
好きなんてその時の運不運だろ。あんたほどの腕があれば十分にいけると思うがな。
波の突きじゃダメなんですよ。冠したら3回に1回くらいはそのままカンドラが4つ乗ってここぞという時に狙ってリンシャンが引ける。そのくらいじゃないと。
いや赤坂君、そんなのが頻繁にできたらそれはもう超能力者ですよ。
いえ、イカ様でも超能力でもなく、そのくらいの打ち手は結構いるんですよ。新宿で知り合った泣くたびにドラが乗りまくる雀士なんか鬼のように強かったですし、横浜で打ったプロなんかは当たり前のように一発で引き当ててましたからね。私にはああいう月がないんです。
Type of folks were those? You were named Ryu or Satoshi by any chance?
というわけで総合トップは私でよろしいですね。
へい乾杯でございますよ。
I'm looking forward to getting out of... That was what, like half an hour of Mahjong?
負けた。久しぶりに大負けだ。
しかし打ってる時の坊主気合入ってたな。結構怖かったぜ。
よく言われます。自分ではそんなに目つき変えてるつもりはないんですがね。そんなに怖い目になってましたか
Three of us nodded emphatically in agreement. That was Akasaka-kun, the Mahjong prodigy. Before he goes home from his assignment, maybe I could have him go play at the high-stakes table in my place. But it's not good to get greedy.
じゃあ仕方ないや。約束です。夜の学習会はこれでお開きにしましょう。申し訳ありませんね、おやっさん。今夜はこれでお開きです。
しゃあねえな。消えて寝るわ。体力つけんと体が持たん。
お仕事が大変なんですか？
ああ、おやっさんはひなみ沢ダムの第一工区の監督さんなんです。住民とは連日小競り合いをしてますからね。しんどい商売ですよ。
来年あたり第二工区も任されちまうかもしれねえな。黒田さん、血圧上がりまくりって聞いたしよ。身が持たねえよ。
おやっさんなら大丈夫でしょう。あなた、見た目よりも面の皮厚めですしね。
俺だって仏じゃねえからな。腹渡にくり返るときあるぞ。特に園崎のあの小娘は我慢がならん。あいつの顔面いつか簡単には治らんくらいに歪ませたろって思ってる。
まあ。でも給料はいいんでしょ？かなり破格の給金だって聞きましたよ。
おっとりめえだ。あんなに世知辛い職場で給料が安かったら誰も残らんよ。おいクラウド、 警察はいつになったら村の人間全部追っ払ってくれるんだ。国から立ち退き命令とか出てるんだろ。
ねえ、どうなってるんでしょうね。
The old man, who identified himself as the foreman of the Hinamizawa Dam, spewed a few complaints until he felt better about it and left
じゃ、
quietly.
行きましょう。あとは佐藤さんに任せますかね。
大石さんは帰られるんですか？
私が一緒でもお邪魔しちゃうだけでしょ。それに佐藤さんの仕事を買ったのはあなたです。私は対価を払ってませんからね。
Oishi-san was kind of sketchy, but he was strangely conscientious about some things. Felt quite a bit of gap between myself and Oishi's generation from that part of him I didn't comprehend.
じゃあ坊主。いや、ジャンシ様にもう坊主なんて言えねえな。赤坂くんでよかったっけ？
はい。
じゃあ赤坂くん、行こうか。
では赤坂さん、また何か困ったことがあったらいつでも頼りに来てくださいね。
大石さんにお支払いできるような対価はもう持ってませんよ。
んじゃ、今度の勝負で少し手加減してもらえたらチャラにしますよ。
Oishi, seemingly still not having had his fill of playing around, without overstaying his welcome, disappeared into the night. I look forward to getting out of Mahjong and getting back into creepiness, but that's how these games work, is they'll do like something creepy and then they'll break it up for quite a fair bit of time and then come back to it. The informant, named Sato-san, let me get into his car before he set off. He favored narrow roads and made numerous short left turns.
左折法による尾行確認ですか？
詳しいな。
Checking to see if you were being tailed by making left turns was a rather classic technique. There's just a single pursuer who could confirm it that way. If you were being tailed as a team, this archaic method wouldn't let you shake them. Of course, doing it anyway was better than not.
赤坂くんが何者かは旦那から何も聞いてないんだが、やっぱり警察関係かい？尾行確認に詳しいなんて、あとは探偵者くらいしか思いつかねえね。
言わなければならないものでないなら拒否したい質問ですね。
やれやれ。麻雀やってからすっかり雰囲気が大人びちまったな。会った時のあのおどおどしたあんたはどこ行っちゃったんだよ。
I smiled wryly. Looking back now, I had to be a little grateful for being made to play Mahjong. Thanks to that, I was able to relieve some tension. Eventually, Sato-san, confirming that there were no cars following us, slipped outside the city. We were on a pitch-black country road, unable to see anything besides the lights outside. We made a single road tile. That sounds great, Sam says. I can't... How many tiles do you plan to do? I can imagine it's quite a bit. I am also not really an artist, and I imagine it would take me just as long, if not longer, to do the same. The only things I was able to hear were the hum of the car's air conditioning, and the chirping of insects and frogs.
旦那からひなみ沢村については多少のことは聞いてんだろ？
御三家という旧家による支配や、現在は園崎家が一党独裁をしているとか、そういう話ですか？
そこまで知ってるならくだらない前置きは省略していいな。
ではお願いします。犬飼大臣の孫の誘拐に鬼ヶ淵死守同盟が関与しているか否かを。
Sato-san checked the rear-view mirror one more time to confirm that there wasn't anyone behind us before speaking.
昨夜園崎本家で親族会議が開かれたそうだ。
You're just getting used to using GIMP for this? Makes sense. Yeah, trying to use something for a different purpose does take some time and some setup and just getting familiar with it.
親族会議ってのは旦那から聞いてるか？
いえ。
普
通に親族会議って言ったらまあ親戚が集まってお茶でも飲むようなもんだよな。だが園崎本家の親族会議っていうのはそんなのんびりしたものとはわけが違う。
Family council held by the Sonozaki main house. That would be a meeting between those who truly controlled Hinamizawa village. They wouldn't be talking about private family matters, it would be about the village as a whole. About organizing activities against the dam project. Among other things, everything would be decided there. In reality, they were deciding the fate of the village. The head of the meeting was Oryu Sonozaki, more or less called Empress Sonozaki, as the ultimate decision-maker of the clan, who was to be feared and respected. Infirm with old age, she was often unable to stand on her own, but her words carried enough weight to sway the fate of the village. It seemed that lately she had grown weak. On days where she wasn't feeling well, remained bedridden. Family councils that occurred while she wasn't feeling well took place with her on the floor. In the middle of a dignified Japanese-style house, still in a futon, only the upper half of her body sitting upright, a stern look on her face. That was Oryu Sonozaki. Sitting next to her was her heir, Mion Sonozaki. He was still young. No, young wasn't quite the right word. He was a girl who remained childish. Her role was to merely sit beside Oryu Sonozaki, sometimes responding to her requests. However, she was the only one deemed worthy to succeed Oryu. She had the same hawkish eyes, enough to give pause to anybody who so much as looked at them. Much was expected of her in the future, this granddaughter of the Sonozaki's leader. But also, on either side of her, sat several other important members of the remaining three families, the Kimiyoshi family and the Furude family. First on the list for the Kimiyoshi family was of course the mayor of Hinamizawa village, Kichiro Kimiyoshi. Lined up beside him were several more of his direct relatives. Opposite to them sat the other of the three families, the Furude family. The Furude family was only comprised of the family of the Shinto priest. The only ones sitting there were said priest, his wife, and their daughter Rika. Rika was doted on by many of the older folk in the village, and it seemed that Oryu was no exception. While the stress from just attending a family council was said to be enough to shorten your lifespan by 3 days, it seemed like Rika was the only one exempt from that. No matter how charged the atmosphere was around her, she paid it no mind, instead humming along as she doodled in a sketchbook. In fact, the night before, lying on her stomach while humming and doodling, she nonchalantly tucked her legs into Oryu's futon like it was a kotatsu. All this was the three families. All around the room, lined row upon row, were relatives of the Sonozaki family. The only ones who were afforded cushions to sit on were direct relatives. The others were left to sit in the seiza position directly on the tatami mats. The Empress Sonozaki enshrined at their center, they were almost like a giant snake coiled around the room. It was decided that everybody would sit in order of their rank. The number of people from the Sonozaki family was overwhelming. The fact that the Sonozaki family held so many seats at a meeting where everything pertaining to the village was decided made determining where the balance of power was held in the three families as clear as day. The number of members in attendance from each of the families directly reflected how much influence they had in ruling Hinamizawa.
その会議で何が話されたんですか?
I want to know how he knows all this. Sato-san, after remaining quiet for a while, spoke.
マスコミ関係に支払ってる謝礼金の額が大きいんじゃないかい?
Breaking the long moment of silence was the head of the Kimiyoshi family, Kichiro Kimiyoshi. The Onikafuchi Defense Alliance wasn't a business. They were nothing more than a private organization pushing for the cancellation of the Hinamizawa Dam project, with no reliable source of income. Fundraising had always been a problem. When they first started operating, they had managed to collect a sizable amount of funds through donations. As the conflict dragged on, that amount was steadily declining.
石を投げるだけが全ての時代じゃないさ。マスコミの力も侮れないのは重々承知しているし、今後もその力を借りたいのは同じさ。
Expressions of the people related to the Sonozaki family were sullen. The one who suggested that they should borrow that power was the family head, Oryu Sonozaki. The battle wasn't just about force of arms. Civilized age, there were civilized methods of fighting. Oryo suggested that, creating a strategy incorporating the mass media. Oryo's foresight was spot on. The effects of that plan, while at first unclear, slowly began to manifest. If the physical confrontation at the construction site was meant to delay progress on the dam by even one day, then the propaganda war using the media was aimed at attacking the dam project itself. At first, there were those who had doubts about that strategy. There was nobody who called those results into question. But in order to maintain those media ties, a colossal amount of money was required. As long as the amount of funds they had was abundant, things would turn out fine. It couldn't be argued that it was a massive expense, but the results spoke for themselves. But with the conflict continuing to drag on, the circumstances had changed. The head of the Sonozaki family, no, the one who sat at the pinnacle of the Hinamizawa 3 families, Oryo, had suggested the idea herself. It was already untouchable, and continued to be allowed to drain from the budget. Nobody acknowledged that it should be so allowed, but nobody could say anything. That was the price of dealing with the mass media.
どうも、お嬢さん。
The only person who could object to a plan proposed by the head of the Sonozaki household herself was probably Mayor Kimiyoshi. Oryo, the hard-to-define expression on her face, as if she had severed herself from the fetters of mortal emotion, simply listened quietly to Kimiyoshi's words. But really, it's hard to tell if she's quietly listening, or didn't even have the intention of listening at all.
去年機関士の値上げの理解を得るのにも随分苦労したじゃない。一度だけってことで理解を得て、また今年もってわけにはいかないよ。ねえ、古手さん。
The mayor looked to the priest and his wife from the Furude family for affirmation. The priest gave a vague expression, avoiding a prompt response. His wife gave her answer without a second
そうで
thought.
すね。機関士代は特に貧しい家には大きな負担になっています。みんな自分たちの村のためだからと耐えていますが、これ以上の値上げはやめた方がいいでしょうね。
The bulletin was, as its name implied, a bulletin published by the Onigafuchi Defense Alliance. It outlined the Alliance's activities, ideals, and resolve, but you couldn't deny the contents were rather piecemeal. That bulletin's main goal wasn't to inform people, but rather was something to sell to businesses and people living in the village, or connected to it, and using those sales to collect funds. In other words, it had become something of a tax. Of course, it didn't have to be said that this was one of the main sources of income for the Onigafuchi Defense Alliance. Originally, purchase was supposed to be voluntary, but in Hinamizawa it had silently become the opposite. In the neighboring towns as well, it seemed that many businesses were buying copies just to avoid butting heads with the Alliance. The priest whispered to his wife to not say anything unnecessary, was struck down decidedly with a cold glare. Cowering from that glare, the priest shut his mouth. The priest's wife always held the power in their relationship. That was because she was the one who carried the Furude bloodline. The priest merely married into the family. He was nothing more than somebody who adopted the name just to join the 3 families. He should have been able to find a spot fairly high up in the hierarchy of things. The lack of authority in his voice meant that he had not gained any favor. Casting a backward glance at her rather disparate parents, Rika continued to doodle whimsically without paying them any mind. Signaled by a look from Oryo, Mion brought her ear closer to her grandmother. There, something was said to her in a quiet voice. After responding with a couple of questions and a nod from Oryu, Mion looked around the room and conveyed her grandmother's words.
機関士の値上げもやむを得ません。
Kimiyoshi made a face, like he just bit into something unpleasant, but that expression quickly disappeared like it had never happened at all.
だけどミオンちゃん、君だって分かってると思うけど、機関士の負担は決して軽いものじゃない。南沢のすべての人間にかかる重みなんだ。あんまり負担をかけすぎれば内部から崩れることだって。
内部から崩れるのは誰ですか？
どれって別にそういう意味じゃ。
最初に崩れるのは誰かと聞いています。
Being cross-examined by a girl who still had fragments of childishness remaining within her, the word stuck in Kimiyoshi's throat as he sunk into silence. Mion repeated her question once more, looking around the crowded room. Everybody refrained, making eye contact to avoid being pierced by her gaze. The words she had spoken were inarguably said in proxy for Oryo. That's why when Mion spoke them, they carried the same weight. The look in her eyes was different. With Oryo's, they had a hawkish gaze, strong enough that anybody looking upon them would freeze in their tracks and yield. That gaze was without question, one that belonged to Mion herself. Mion would eventually inherit everything from Oryo. The day when she would stand up as a young and capable leader in her own right would come. Nobody wanted to believe otherwise, for even a minute. That's why nobody even thought of Mion as just some sort of little kid.
君吉さん、機関士の値上げごときでは誰の決意も崩れませんよ。
Kimiyoshi, while grumbling a little bit, made a gesture as if to say he had no objection.
マスコミ関係への出費は継続とします。その出費がさらに圧迫となるようなら、機関士の値上げもやむを得ない。
Thank you for the lurk, Samuses. Mion had rendered her judgment. Everybody bowed their heads, silently listening to her
園崎
words.
家当主代行、園崎美音です。我が名において以上決定し、異議はこれを認めず、抵抗ある場合は実力をもって排除します。
The formal decree was read aloud, indicating her judgment. There would be no retrial. There was a certain authority behind those words that even a courthouse couldn't compare to. She was a judge. She would have banged her gavel, signaling that the matter was settled. Mion pulled out a large bell from inside her clothes and rang it. Everybody present could only prostrate themselves before the harsh sound of the bell.
なんとも大時代的な親族会議ですね。
あんたみたいな若いもんにはちょっと信じられないだろうけどね。こういう古い土地にはこんなのが未だ根強く残ってるもんさ。
It was exactly as Oishi had said. The old system of the three families had vanished, and now the Sonozaki family was running things by themselves. On top of that, the rule was borderline despotic.
会議はそれで終わりですか？
いや、まだ続く。先を続けるよ。
Eventually, after the ringing of the bell ceased, there was a deafening silence. In all of that, a lone man shuffled closer to Mion and whispered something in her ear. Mion asked several questions, quietly in response. She was satisfied. She motioned for the man to leave. The man who talked to Mion was a member of a gang that her father was the leader of. That organization had the entire area of Shishibone City under its control. It was quite well known even here. Of course, this was talking about the criminal underworld, so it's not like just anybody would know. But just showing a patch with the gang symbol on it was enough to resolve any disputes in the neighborhood. Mion's biological father, Oryo, was her daughter's husband. The power of that man's gang was the driving force that controlled the dark underbelly of the Onigafuchi Defense Alliance. And so that man, from his position in the next in line control, the three families, continued to coerce everybody around him with his unconventional presence. Mion exchanged a look with her father. Was it okay for her to tell what she just heard directly to Oryo? It looked like she was asking him that question. Father gently but firmly nodded his response. Mion nodded, sidled up to Oryo, and informed her of something. Eventually, Yon finished conveying her message, separated herself from Oreo, and fixed her posture, waiting for Oreo to signal her response. It wasn't often that Oreo showed any emotion. That's why when she started to laugh quietly, a vague sense of uneasiness crept over everybody in the room.
そら、難儀なこともあったものよの。
Oreo was laughing so happily that Kimiyoshi had to hesitantly ask,
どうしたんだい、お嬢さん。
我らにとって土地が母なら、この度のダムの騒ぎは、母の命を脅かされる騒ぎっちゅうことだろうな。
Kimiyoshi, unable to comprehend the meaning of her words, looked confused. Oreo, with a wide grin on her face, turned towards everybody and addressed them in a clarion voice.
ダムの親玉の大臣がの、孫さらわれちまって、右往左往しとるっちゅう話だ。こんれでおあいこだの。
バカな。
Information on the kidnapping of Minister Inugai's grandson shouldn't have leaked from anywhere. How did they know? Even we didn't know much about the kidnapping incident. Exactly how did an antiquated household so far from Tokyo come to know of it? It was a tranquil place, but I couldn't help but have an uneasy feeling about Hinamizawa village. At some point, I'd mentally filed this place away as unrelated to the incident at hand. That mental paperwork had just blown away in the wind.
どうして、鬼ヶ淵死守同盟が知っているんだ。
Sato-san, unable to come up with an answer, fell into
すみません。
silence.
続きをお願いします。
なあ。
犬飼建設大臣のお孫さんがさらわれた。お嬢さん、それは本当かい。
That major of an incident was nowhere to be seen in the newspapers or on TV. But in Hinamizawa, there was nothing strange about Oreo knowing something that the rest of the world didn't.
我らの痛みは母を失う痛みじゃの。それに値するとは思わんが、孫を失う痛み。少しは答えるといいんじゃがの。なあ。
The last question wasn't addressed to anybody in particular. It was as if she was looking for consensus.
だが、土地と人様の子供ではわけが違うの。隠すのは構わんが、怪我だけはさせたくないものだな。こにゃ何の罪もねえ。大事にしたれな。
それはつまり、鬼ヶ淵死守同盟が誘拐事件に関与している。
うん。必ずしもそうとは言えねえな。
どうして当主であるお涼がこれほどまではっきりと誘拐した孫の処遇について指示を出しているのに。
兄さん、こりゃね、その崎家のいつものことなんだよ。
いつものこと？それはどういう意味です？
Let's say there was a particular problem, one that wasn't exactly favorable for the Sonozaki family. Oreo showed concern over that particular problem, fearing that somebody who attended the family council would be helpful. As a result, Oreo's wish would be granted. However, neither Oreo or anyone else would know who actually did it. With this kind of clever ploy, the Sonozaki family was able to manipulate events, even though they had their hands laid out on the table.
では、親族会議に出席していた誰かが犯人ということですか？
あるいはそもそも犯人なんかいない可能性だってあるよな。俺自身、その万座の一同の中に誘拐犯がいるって確信を持ってるわけじゃない。ただ、自分の意見を述べただけさ。
It was an odd and unpleasantly secretive way of doing things. Were they involved, or weren't they? I couldn't see beyond the veil. This much, however, I could say with certainty. This kidnapping was an ironclad secret. No matter how high a position somebody was in, they wouldn't even know about it. If there was somebody who would know about it, they would be connected to public safety. In other words, one of us. The only other options were people connected to the case itself, including the minister. There would be people affected by the incident, or the people that committed it. In any case, there was no way an old household in a place removed from Tokyo by over 6 hours of highway travel would know about it. Them knowing it all was already strange. My suspicions began to accumulate, like falling snow.
孫の誘拐についてお涼が述べたのはここまでだ。あんたの知りたかったことが含まれてりゃいいんだがな。あとは兄ちゃんの仕事だな。何のお仕事やってるか知らんけど、園崎家を相手にするなら相当の覚悟でやっとけよ。大石の旦那は怖いもの知らずだから
Welcome back, Samuses.
あれでも2、3回は襲われてる。最近は来てないけど、一時はオフの時も防塵ベストを着込んでたんだよな。
ええ、忠告ありがとうございます。気をつけることにします。
標準語が流暢だよな。兄さんは東京とかの人？
え？それが何か？
Investigators were always close to danger. Best not to divulge any information on
兄さんのお仕
myself.
事だけどさ、ひょっとして警視庁の公安部の人ってことある？
I couldn't remain silent here. Do the same thing as admitting it.
まさか。
こっから旦那からもらった金の範囲には入らないんだが、兄さんとは今日宅を囲んだ仲間だからな。サービスってことで話してやるよ。お涼から誘拐の話が出た後、もう一つ話題が出たんだ。
Another topic Oreo brought up? Right before he told me this, Sato-san asked if I was from the Metropolitan Public Safety Division. In other words, what those two things meant caused a chill to run up my spine.
そんででな、大臣の孫さらったのを調べるために東京からはるばる公安の捜査官が派遣されてくるっちゅう話だ。
公安の捜査官？
大臣の孫の誘拐な、うかつにゃ大ごとにできゃんってことで、警視庁の公安部が独自で調べとるっちゅう話だ。はっ、大行なこったの。どうした？
Rika, who had been drawing the entire time and was completely uninterested in the conversation up until now, looked at Oreo with an interested face as soon as the topic of public safety came up.
警視庁が来たのですか？
リカちゃまは警視庁も知ってなさるんかい。偉いの。
誰が来たのですか？
公安のどんなやつが来よったんか。誰ぞわかるやつはおらんかいな。
Mion's father raised his hand slightly.
新米の若造が一人と聞き及んでおります。
新米？ほかほかなのですか？
ん？ええ、はい。新米とか。
Mion's father smiled wryly as he answered Rika's
ほか
question.
ほかのふかふか？
ええ。
ほかほかのふかふか？
Rika smiled with interest. Why did Rika suddenly act interested only when it came to this topic? That was a question that apparently nobody had the answer to.
リカちゃまはその男のことを何か知っているのかな？
知んないのですよ。
After her rather flat reply, Rika buried herself underneath Oreo's futon again. When she buried herself there, Rika no longer started drawing again. Instead, she was making an expression like she was deep in contemplation.
どうしますか？お母さん。
Mion's father posed the question. He had the type of uncouth expression on his face indicating that, given the order, he could snuff the problem out at any time.
はるばるひなみ沢まで来よった。しばらくはのんびりさせてやるのもよかろう。
泳がせろということでしょうか。
Mion's father asked in response. Oreo smiled thinly as she responded.
ほっといたれな。が、あんまりおいたが過ぎるようやった。そん時は遠慮せんとな。なめられるのはすっきゃせんね。
なんて話があったそうだ。まさかあんたその警視庁の新米じゃないよな。
まさか。
The sensation of cold, bristling fear began to crawl its way up my back. This family council took place last night, in other words, yesterday. And today, as dressed up as a tourist headed towards Hinamizawa, my cover was already blown. And I remembered the first person I met when I got to the bus stop. I couldn't breathe. The person at the family council expressed interest in the man being dispatched from the Metropolitan Police, Rika Furude. And then, the person who was waiting for me the whole time in the bus shelter, Rika Furude. An unthinkable image. No, it was a delusion. We met at that bus shelter. Did Rika-chan already know my true identity? Did she know that I, Akasaka, dispatched from the Metropolitan Police Department, come to meet me? Then, including Mayor Kimiyoshi, every villager that I met, everybody knew, but just pretended not to? So Oreo had given instructions not to interfere. Thinking about it logically, it didn't seem possible. I met quite a number of people. There's people that are good at acting, then there's people who are bad at hiding things. If there was that many people, then there should have been somebody among them who knew I was from public safety, couldn't hide their hostility. However, I didn't feel any presence like that. But then, even still, why did Oreo tell them to leave me alone? Was it because if they were careless about it, it would only raise more suspicion? Or was it because they believed a rookie like me wouldn't be able to find anything? Akasaka is a coward. I recalled that strange voice which could only make me believe that Rika-chan had been possessed. That unknown entity, no matter how you looked at it, knew my true identity from the get-go. And then, how did it warn me again? That's right. It warned me to hurry up and go back to Tokyo. Instead of the realistic worry that the Onigafuchi Defense Alliance had discovered my identity, the absurd worry brought on by the unknown girl stuck with me even more. What exactly was that girl? What was the thing I would eventually regret? That mysterious girl, Rika Furude. Let's stop this. Everything I was thinking of right now is merely conjecture. Tomorrow, first thing in the morning, I'll report everything I heard right now to HQ and await further orders. There was no mistaking that the possibility the Onigafuchi Defense Alliance were related to this case was there. That the fact that my cover was blown meant I was in a precarious position. As everybody at HQ is already extremely busy, they may not be able to spare the support.
もういいかい？よければ好きなところまで送るよ。
あ、すみません。では、お会いした元の駅までお願いします。
A rural road where even a street light was rare. I couldn't see anything. I wasn't aware of anything but the asphalt that was lit up by the headlights. Outside of that light, was it simply darkness? Or was there something lurking there, waiting to strike? I had to think I drew the short straw here. I wanted to go back to Tokyo. For some reason, the voice of the girl warning me to go back to Tokyo still lingered in my head. I would like to think, though, if he called them in the morning, it was like, hey, I've got pretty concrete evidence that they've done stuff, that they would send people down immediately. But that was the 3rd chapter done. We got 3 new tips. One that has blood. As usual, we'll go from left to right. So we'll start with the investigation runs aground.
昨日銀座の料亭でお会いしてね。そういう話が出たんだよ。
別室の謁見でしょう。連中、公安に干渉しすぎですよ。あまり迎合すると悪い洗礼を残しますね。
犬飼大臣は公安の動きに不快感をあらわにしているらしい。多分月曜の町議で次官からその旨の話が出るんじゃないかと思う。参ったな。
次官へは局長級に話つけてもらうしかないですよ。給料を多くもらってる人の当然の仕事ってことで。
まあそうなると局長からは絶対に大臣脅迫の物証を求められるよ
な。あの人たまにどっちの味方か分かんなくなりますね。うちらの味方しなくてどうすんのっての。
まあ多分大臣を経由しての圧力だと思ってるけどね。俺が時間室で油汗かいて時間稼ぐ間に調査進めてもらうしかないよな。全身の汗絞られて絞りかすになっちゃうかもしれないけどな。でどうなの調査の進行は。
期待してた濃厚なラインがことごとく外れて正直途方に暮れてます。
最近の大臣発言をまとめるとひなみ沢ダムの計画の話が目立つっていう報告を聞いたけど、それは
目立つっていうか本当に微細な程度の違和感ですね。たまたま県議連でのスピーチだったから時事ネタを話しただけかもしれないし。
確か地元団体が過激に抵抗してるってやつだっけ。鬼ヶ淵死守同盟。確か赤坂君に調べてもらってたよね。
僕は連中には今回の事件は起こせないと踏んでいます。ですが疑わしいところのほとんどが真っ白な以上疑いの枠から外すわけにはいかないかもですね。赤坂君からはその可能性は否定できないとの軽い報告は受けています。
なら調べてみる価値はあるんじゃないの。しらみつぶしなんだから残る疑わしい団体がそこ一つならやるしかないでしょ。
Have food. What have you acquired, Samuses?
ま、調べる団体はそこだけじゃないんですがね。鬼ヶ淵と同じ程度のレベルで疑わしい団体になるともう相当の数になりますよ。人手も時間も残業代も全然足りません。
赤坂君からさ、もうちょっと詳しく聞いてみてよ。俺はちょっと要注意に感じるけどな、その死守同盟。
彼、村人とうまく接触できたって連絡してきました。現地の警察とも連携できてるみたいですね。
赤坂君との連絡密にしてください。それで彼からの情報が引っかかるようであれば増援を送ることもありということで。
わかりました。すいません、片岡市長。局長からお電話です。こっちに回しますか。
ああ、いい、そっち行きます。もしもし。
So meanwhile back in Tokyo, they're already talking about, sounds like Akasaka could use some help, but that they're not quite sending over people to help him yet. Okay, next we have what's in the box, which has a giant blood stain. Are they gonna cut off a finger of the grandson, or the ear they talked about earlier? That's my guess. Do you believe that there are choices in life? There are many people who lament the following. If there only existed points in life where there were clear choices to make, we'd be able to scrutinize those carefully and make decisions that would lead us to a better future. Every time I hear people lament as such, I cast it off as a rather trivial worry. Even if you were given a clear choice, it wouldn't be meaningful at all. There wouldn't be any such path to a better future. This hard to understand? Let's pretend that in front of you, there are two strange boxes. In other words, you have two clear choices. Do you open the red box, or the blue box? A lot of things would be uncertain even with that choice, wouldn't they? If you don't have the option of opening neither, then your choice boils down to the natural impulse of opening a box holds the better result for you. After examining the shape and features of each, and pondering a great many things, you have to pick either the red or the blue. If this was you, which box would you open? Red or blue? Box A? I would go blue. Not that it really means anything. If you were to go by their traditional meanings, then red would be a dangerous, threatening color. However, that doesn't automatically mean it would be calm and relaxing inside the blue box either. In fact, it might even be that the colors are a trap, make you wary of the red box, and have you open the blue. A trap? Could it be the contents of the box aren't a reward, but rather a penalty? See? Now you're at a loss. You're so conflicted over the choice between red and blue that you've started wishing that there was an option to open neither and just leave. But there isn't. You have to open either the red or the blue box. Oh, I forgot to say this, but if you choose one box, the other will disappear, so you'll never know the contents of the box you don't open. I'll just put that rule at the end there for you. Now, why don't you choose? The red box or the blue box? It's alright, you won't lose anything by picking either one. Come on now. Oh gosh, we actually have a decision. Is it going to let me save here? Is that something I can do? Of course not. I was not expecting a choice, I'll be entirely honest. Is there a quick save button? Is F5. Did that do anything? I'm guessing it didn't if it wouldn't let me save regularly. No. Okay. Well, I said I was going blue, and yeah, I'll go blue. Have you thought about it? In the end, you chose this color, didn't you? As soon as you chose, the other box disappeared. So you can give up on the contents of that one, okay? That's the rule. Now, open up the box you chose. Inside the box, there was a stick of chewing gum. I know you're a little disappointed. Well, that's only natural. No matter how you look at it, looks like you drew the dud. Correct box might have had a bar of chocolate in it for all you know. No, in fact something incredible, like a pair of tickets to Hawaii, might have been in there. And even if you wanted to verify that, the other box has already disappeared. There's no way you can check it now. If you think about it from an optimistic point of view... Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a meaningless choice. Just maybe, the other box was empty, and this box was the winner. Being satisfied, or perhaps not, with such a cheap prize, you pop it into your mouth and start chewing it happily. So, what do you think in the end? You were given a second chance. You try to open the other box? But unfortunately, the chance to choose between the red box or the blue box has come and gone, never to be seen again. The chance to change your selection will never come. Don't your parents often say, every choice you make in life only happens once, so choose carefully? See? Choices aren't that great after all. Aren't you a little disillusioned now? Yeah, it doesn't mean it just says you chose this box. I mean, we can't, this is like a little thing, we can go through and replay it if people want to see what happens if we choose the other box. And I can just speed through the dialogue until we get to that choice. See, choices aren't that great after all. Oh, I read this. Yeah, because I mean, we can redo what's in the box, so I'm guessing it's exactly the same thing. This is not a game that has choices. It's supposed to be, it's supposed to be like a detective book. It gives you all the clues through all the games, and you're supposed to figure out what your answer is. And in fact, I think it's by the end of this game, they've supposed to have given you everything to have answered every question you have, in theory. Samus is gonna look it up. If it's different enough, we can do it again. But in the meantime, I'm gonna look into the Glint in the Demon's Eye.
Eh, はい。それで、お通夜が明日の午後6時からになりまして、告別式があさってのお昼、12時から13時までになりまして、会場は沖宮セレモニーホールになります。
か。池澤助役のお孫さんの葬式じゃ、何にも挨拶なしってわけにもいかんね。みよ、代わりに出てえな。
うん、了解。喪服で行く？香典はいくらくらい？
学校の服でえんね。前のボタンちゃんと止めてくんねよ。香典は5万。10万包んだれな。世話になったかんな。
Mion quietly whistled in awe, the exorbitant amount of money her grandmother was offering.
池澤さんはな、沖宮の事務所長だった頃からしっかりした人だったね。役人は挨拶って言っても絶対に玄関までしか来ん。でもな、池澤さんはわしがお茶を勧めるといっつも上がってくれて、ちゃんと話を聞いてくれた。人の話を最後まで聞く、本当に鏡みたいな人だったんね。
The two guests made a show of nodding, making it clear they were paying attention, as Oreo reminisced. The sight of them trying not to get on Oreo's bad side was humorous enough to elicit laughter from Mion occasionally.
池澤助役のお孫さんはいくつで亡くなったんね。
11歳だそうで。
There's a minor difference, but at a cursory glance it's the same. Yeah, honestly, I expected the dialogue to be exactly the same, but if it's like, instead of a stick of chewing gum, it's like something else minor, like it's the chocolate bar, I don't know. Oreo closed her eyes and shook her head lightly, lamenting the loss of such a young life. Do it again? We can do it again after this.
孫は一人だ言うてんな。
I'm actually wondering if there's a Steam achievement for choosing both. It seems like the kind of thing there would be a Steam achievement for.
親より先に死ぬほどの親不幸あるめな。
ばっちゃんも他人には優しいね。私やシオンが死んだら同じように悲しんでくれる。
There's a little thing you get if you do both. Okay, we'll do the other one.
アホ抜かすんでね。演技でもねすったなんと。シャラーったく。
The game gonna yell at me, being like, I told you you couldn't go back and do it, but you did it anyways. Having got the reaction she expected, Mion cackled. Two guests, unsure if they were supposed to laugh along, and said forced awkward smiles.
それでは本日は失礼いたします。では明日の夕方5時にお迎えに参りますんで、よろしくお願いいたします。ではごめんくださいませ。
After bowing their heads repeatedly, the guests left by the front door. Mion saw them off, waving her little hand goodbye.
帰ったよ。お役人もばっちゃのご機嫌伺いに大変だね。不法なんか電話でいいと思うのにね。
Well, it was true that Oreo Sonozaki was an essential person for both her relatives and the residents of Hinamizawa as a whole. As a voting bloc, they numbered in the several thousands. It wasn't hard to imagine the mayor would try to pander to her. Unlike Mion, however, Oreo was looking up longingly at the sky from the veranda.
どうしたの？猛録した？
誰のお孫さんであろうと。気の毒だのう、思ったんよ。
Saying that, she let out a deep sigh. Mion was let down, as normally her grandmother would have scolded her for her attitude.
ミオ。俺、例の大臣の孫。さらわれてからどのくらいになる？
4日かな。
Oreo let out another deep sigh.
旧敵の孫とはいえ、気の毒だな。
そう。
十分気はせいだろ。そろそろ終わりにしちゃれな。
Playful expression drained from Mion's face, leaving behind a stern one. And then, as if to ascertain Oryu's will, looked into her eyes. Oryu's expressing her intention with only those eyes, looked back into
お
Mion's.
茶が欲しいんで頼んでな。さっきのチョコレートも食べといね。
Mion gave a small nod, then turned around.
シミコさん、いますか？抹茶に紅茶入れてあげてください。
Far away, voice responded in the affirmative. Mion, after confirming he'd been heard, picked up the phone and began dialing.
あ、もしもし？ミオンだけど。うん。うちのお父さん、います。
Okay, so Samus says there's something slightly different, and there's a little thing we get if we do both. So we're gonna go through it again. I'm gonna mash, just like in the bottom corner, so I can't accidentally pick on something. I assume everything's the same until we get to... I'm just looking at the text, and it looks like they're identical. Okay. This time, we're opening the red box. Have you thought about it? In the end, you chose this color, didn't you? As soon as you chose, the other box disappeared. So you can give up on the contents of that one, okay? That's the rule. Now open up the box you chose. Inside the box there was a piece of caramel. Right now you're thinking, that's it? That's right, the contents of the red box and the blue box were a piece of caramel and a stick of chewing gum. You might have thought you made the wrong choice before, but now seeing them together like this, you can't really say that either choice was the wrong one. Well, I guess everybody has their personal preferences. You prefer caramel to gum, for example, which I personally do. I got off of gum just sort of when I had braces and you weren't supposed to chew gum, and then after that I never really chewed gum again. Except on airplanes to help pop my ears. That's it. You're definitely thinking of choosing to open the box again based on that preference. The clear choices you wanted were basically this. The selfish desire to open up both boxes and compare the contents, then pick the one most suited to you. But you see, reality is the same as this game. You pick one, the one you didn't choose disappears. So there's no way you could check the result. If at that time, you had done this, or perhaps you had done that, then it wouldn't be hard to imagine that you could be happier, or perhaps less happy than you are right now. In the end, you only have the pleasure of approving or being disappointed by the choice that you did make. That's fine. After all, didn't you enjoy the thrill of making the choice? Like now, you knew the contents of both boxes, and the choice between the red box or the blue box would just be a waste of time. Because instead of this boring game about boxes, you're looking at the quickly changing evening summer sky, listening for the distant sound of thunder and pondering if it's going to rain or not. That would be much more fun. game is voicing one of your anxieties and you hate. Yeah, these games are not supposed to be fun. These games are supposed to hit you at a psychological level. Okay, so we did all the tips. What's our time? Okay, we got about half an hour left today. But we'll keep going. I don't think we'll make it to the end of chapter 4. I think I was wrong when I said there's 4 chapters in this game. I think it might be 6. But yeah, we're going to continue, see how far we get in half an hour, and then find a natural stopping point for it. I had a restless night's sleep. I did nothing but turn over repeatedly during a night that seemed like it lasted for eternity. Even then, I eventually fell asleep at some point, not realizing how high in the sky the sun had risen. I shook off the urge to go back to sleep. It was then I noticed that the phone was ringing. Where are the uncles? So our wife is about to give birth to a child. If either one of us has siblings, they will then be the uncles. So that's where the uncles will be. Time was almost 10:30 in the morning. It's clearly too late for a wake-up call.
赤坂さんですか？おはようございます。大石です。
Waking up to the sound of Oishi's voice was little too much of a shock. My delicate ears were ringing. Thanks to that shock, I was suddenly wide awake.
ああ、どうも。おはようございます。
ひょっとして今お目覚めですか？出張中とはいえ勤務時間には起きないといけませんよ。
まったくです。以後、気をつけます。
あなたの眠気をもう一つ覚ましてあげられるかもしれない話があります。ひなみ沢駐在所から届いた遺失物に興味深いものが混じっていたんです。
遺失物？
詳しい話はこちらにいらっしゃってからにしましょう。お昼前に来れますか？
いえ、すぐに伺います。
Wish already knew what my mission was. The way she said it was something that would wake me up, it's hard to believe that would be irrelevant to me. Honestly speaking, judging by the information from Sato-san yesterday, knowing that my cover was already blown, I couldn't wander to and from Hinamizawa carelessly. In other words, my investigation was at an impasse. There was some information that could put me back on the trail. That would be nothing less than a stroke of good fortune. After vigorously washing my face, I pulled on my jacket and hailed a taxi, heading towards Okonomiya Police Station.
おお、来た来た。天才ジャンシ様の到着だ。
遅くなって申し訳ありません。で、一体何が出たんですか？
Absolutely no intention of reminiscing about last night's Mahjong game pressed him to get to the point. Oishi, anticipating that I would act that way, cut to the chase without any resistance.
先ほども申し上げましたが、今朝、ひなみ沢の駐在所から遺失物が届きました。
Lost items that were turned over to the police box sent to Okonomiya Station after the paperwork was filled out. Oishi pulled out a plastic bag from a drawer and laid its labeled contents on the desk.
財布ですか？
でしょうな。中には小銭はあってもお札はなかったもんなんで、スリが中身を抜いた後に捨ててったのかななんて思ったんですがね。最初は。
I didn't understand how this wallet, so far removed from Tokyo, could possibly be related to the kidnapping. It had drawn Oishi's attention. It would have to be something dramatic. The wallet belonged to the missing grandchild. That would be absurd. Like something that convenient would happen. That was it. There were probably initials written on the wallet. The initials of Toshiki Inugai, the minister's grandson, T.I. Thinking like that, at this point, I didn't suppose that this wallet was something that could get Oishi so excited. Oishi, after putting on a pair of disposable plastic gloves, handed me a pair of the same. I didn't feel that this wallet was such an important thing, so I had my doubts about whether there was any point in putting on gloves. However, I didn't want Oishi's intentions to go to waste, so I put them on. I pressed him as this Ace Attorney. Yes, and also the judge probably didn't like it, so I feel like part of my life force just vanished. Oishi opened up the plastic bag and pulled it out, showing me the back. As I imagined, there were initials engraved there. But it was slightly more detailed than what I thought, with Toshiki I marked on it. Oishi grinned at me with a look on his face that said, "See? Can't confirm that this belongs to the minister's grandson," I informed him calmly. This wallet was irrelevant. It's nothing more than Oishi's overeagerness. First of all, there was absolutely no way, in this distant locale, the missing grandson's wallet would be found with such convenient timing. After all, the Onikafuchi Defense Alliance wasn't related to the case in the first place. There was no way this wallet belonged to the grandson. Why I wanted to decide that was the case, even I didn't really know. Even though what should have been a top-secret case was leaked before I had even been dispatched. In this situation, how could I say this was definitely unrelated? Would it be more prudent to pay more attention to this wallet? It had only been a couple of days since I arrived in Hinamizawa. In those couple of days, due to the number of remarkable events, my nerves might have become just a little frayed. Shaking my head slightly, I cleared it of unnecessary thoughts. Oishi opened the waller's zipper, revealing the contents. Inside was small change and a number of crumpled receipts. Oishi, from that jumble, pulled out a folded card. Seeing that, my heart stopped for a moment. It was a card from a dental examination. The name, Toshiki Inugai, and the age. Perfect match. The dentist's location was in Tokyo. There was no need to explain any further. How far was it from Tokyo to Hinamizawa? It's far enough that taking the bullet trains and cars would still take several hours. Why would a wallet with a dental examination card from Tokyo inside show up in Hinamizawa? Could it belong to a tourist who came from Tokyo? We're just denying the truth at this point. Maybe a villager on vacation to Tokyo just happened to pay a visit to the dentist? No, it had to have fallen into somebody's bag by accident. In my mind, I desperately struggled to find a possible excuse as to why this wallet didn't belong to Toshiki Inugai. It was as if it just wouldn't do for this wallet to belong to him. However, weeding out any possibility for error one by one, the haze surrounding the wallet in front of me faded gradually, letting it come into clear focus.
Ne?
I felt a shiver of electricity run up my spine. My pulse quickened and a thin film of sweat began to coat my entire body. From Oishi's point of view, I was probably slack-jawed and spaced out, with a slovenly look on my face.
問い合わせましたか?
そりゃ赤坂さんの仕事でしょ。私はまだそこまでは。
この財布はいつ頃のものでしょうね。
拾ったのは村人です。昨日のことだそうで。
じゃなくて、この財布はいつ頃落ちたものでしょうね。
ここいらに雨があったのはちょうど先週7日前。中身が水にやられた様子はないから、最長で6日前からでしょうね。
この財布の存在は署内で誰が知ってます？
初期対応の日並沢駐在所の警官、それから遺失物対応で係が 2,3 人、あとは私とあなた。内緒の事件と関係があったらまずいでしょ。ベラベラとは喋ってないつもりですよ。
電話を借りていいですか？
どうぞどうぞ。外線は0発信から。
I dialed the phone number inscribed on the examination card. I could hear my pulse pounding inside my head. Could there possibly be something so absurd? The addresses on the receipts and card inside the wallet were all from around the area where the grandson lived. The name on the examination card was also a match. The time we deduced that the wallet had been left behind also matched up with the timeline of the kidnapping. Of course, it was possible I could just laugh it off as a big pile of coincidences. There wasn't any strong evidence. Rather than all this circumstantial proof, the contents of the phone call I was about to make would have a much greater meaning.
お待たせしました。中川歯科です。
どうも。こちらは沖宮署です。実は、お財布の落とし物がありまして、所有ご協力をいただいてもよろしいでしょうか。お財布の中に、そちら様の診察カードが入っておりまして。ええ。氏名は、犬飼俊樹くんです。カードの番号を申し上げますので、電話番号をお調べいただいてもよろしいでしょうか。ええ。ありがとうございます。お願いできますか。
Still holding the receiver, I pulled out a notebook from my breast pocket with my free hand. I opened it to the page with the grandson's address and phone number recorded
どうも
on
すみま
it.
せん。はい。お願いします。
I compared the phone number written in my notebook to the one that was being read out on the other end of the line. During that process, I spun around to look behind me uneasily. I locked eyes with Oishi. Oishi looked puzzled, wondering what the matter was. Why would I feel uneasy and look behind me? That was because the person on the end of the line was reading out the numbers, though doing so straight from my notebook. It seemed that HQ was in quite an uproar thanks to my report. No matter how many times the authenticity of the evidence I had linked to the grandson was called into question, it could only respond that it was the truth. When the lead investigator first picked up the phone, I was grilled about the evidence I found. That was almost too good to be true, if I do say so myself. But after having doubt after doubt dispelled, he fell into silence. No, we don't get to hear the person on the other end of the phone line. I think they actually often do that in this game series, that they'll only give you who's on this end of the phone line, unless it's like two of the main characters. When he picked it up, the background thrum on the other end of the line disappeared. I knew that it had gone completely silent. After asking the same questions about the wallet that the lead investigator did, the chief quietly spoke his next words.
わかりました。
There we go. The chief gets a voice.
こちらから何人か増援を送ります。今日の夕方には到着できるでしょう。赤坂君は引き続き現地調査をお願いします。財布が発見された地域の情報を収集しててください。加納さんは何人か選んで現地へ直接。
The fact that he was sending Keno, the lead investigator here, meant that the chief had decided there was a possibility that the Onigafuchi Defense Alliance were somehow implicit in the kidnapping. However, it felt as though until the lead investigator, whom he trusted, had verified the evidence with his own eyes, he was still going to be skeptical about it.
どうでした？
本庁から増援が出発するそうです。私は現地調査を命じられました。財布の落ちていた場所は
高津戸のあたりだそうです。ここが沖宮。ずーっと行ってここがひなみ沢で、さらに上流にぐーっと上がっていくとこの辺が高津戸です。
Well, she explained where the wallet was found by pointing the locations on the map on the wall. This place, called Takatsudo, is even more remote than Hinamizawa was.
高津戸界隈はほとんど民家なんかありませんよ。昔の廃村です。無人の家屋が点在する、なんとも寂しいあたりですね。
大石さん、高津戸へ案内してもらうことはできますか？
構いませんよ。赤坂さんお一人ではなかなか自由にひなみ沢に出入りはできないでしょうからね。無論また野球帽とマスクをしてもらうことになりますが。
That Oishi had agreed to accompany me was very reassuring. Sato-san's info was to be believed, my cover had been blown. I wasn't sure if the villagers had realized that the fresh meat dispatched from public safety was the tourist that had visited the village yesterday. In other words, me. But deciding that they hadn't noticed would have been overly optimistic. Given a cursory thought, Takatsudo, where the wallet was found, couldn't be ruled out as a hiding spot for the kidnappers. The Takatsudo area didn't have any residential buildings, nor was it alongside a highway. There wasn't a reason for even the locals to go out of their way to visit it. It was exactly what you would call a long-forgotten ghost town at the end of the road. You couldn't ask for a better place to hold a kidnapped grandson. Also, you couldn't get to Takatsudo without passing through Hinamizawa first. Those several conditions made the area all the more important. I couldn't brush it off any longer. There was no longer any doubt that Onigafuchi Defense Alliance, or somebody hired by them, were involved in the kidnapping. That was the case. The fact that this wallet was found might have already been leaked to them. They even knew so much as how the Public Safety Division was operating. The case of the wallet couldn't be something they didn't know. In that case, there was a possibility that the enemy was lying in wait. Dive alone into enemy territory, surrounded by enemy territory, to say the least, required an amount of courage, nay, recklessness, that I just did not have.
大石さんの同行がなければ、そうおいそれと踏み込めない村でしたので、ご協力いただけて本当に助かりました。正直なところ、またお金を要求されるのではと思ってましたよ。
それは正直を言えばひなみ沢なんか好き好んで行きたがないですからね。運賃でも弾んでもらいたい気分ですが、でも一緒にタコを囲んだ友人の頼みとあれば断るわけにはいきませんね。
Oishi grinned as he pounded me on the back. It struck me that he just didn't want to jump ship rather than having any sort of sense of duty towards his job. Even so, that didn't really matter. Right now I really appreciated the gesture.
早速出してもらえますか?
The enemy knew that the police had obtained the wallet, and they'd probably have moved the hostage to a different place. There wasn't a moment to lose. Oishi, without regard to the fact that we were about to head out, began to remove his jacket.
まあ用心ですよ。家中の栗を拾うなら相応の用意が必要と思いましてね。あなたも来ますよ。
Oishi pulled from the drawer below the desk was a stab-proof vest. His name was Toshiki Inugai, the grandson of the Minister of Construction, Inugai. There's only one reason for him being here. Didn't include gym or art class, his grades were above average. That was the result of having private tutoring sessions twice a week. He omitted the fact that he still couldn't do push-ups. There wasn't much else that would make him hate school. Of course, he understood full well that his grandfather was a cabinet minister. He also knew not too many people were that interested in their relationship. He didn't like to go out of his way to bring up his grandfather, or call him the Minister of Construction. And finally, he at least tried to know a little more about what kind of work the Minister of Construction did than your average Joe. What that entailed was that, when you tried your best to make your life better for the masses, sometimes you made a few enemies. He knew that all too well from the time he spent as class representative. His grandfather had made enemies. He knew that he might personally catch some of that fallout, so he had to be twice as cautious. He was taught that by his parents. That's why, the moment he was kidnapped, he instantly knew that this was one of those occasions. He understood that he wasn't being treated as Toshiki Inugai, the person, but rather as Toshiki Inugai, the grandson of the Minister of Construction. That he wasn't personally at fault, but that this was the result of some unavoidable trouble with his grandfather's work. It made little difference, but when he realized that it wasn't because of anything he did, he was able to relax, if only a little. Of course, at first he was struck with the terror befitting his age, wondering what was going to happen to him. But after a while of being tied up and only able to stay lying down, he began to ponder a great many things. First, he thought about the reason he was being abducted like this. He understood the answer to that easily. He was taken hostage to coerce his grandfather, the minister. There was no doubt about that. He didn't know exactly what the Minister of Construction did, but it was easy to imagine that there was much to be gained from threatening him. He respected his grandfather more than most. He earnestly believed that his own grandfather was within the top 20 of the most important people in Japan. That was exactly why he wouldn't forgive anybody who tried to threaten his beloved grandfather. More importantly, he wouldn't forgive anybody who would use him as a tool to threaten his grandfather. His grandfather was really busy and rarely had time to meet with relatives. That's why, with what little time he did manage to scrape together, he just dropped by unannounced. As an apology for not being able to meet during New Year's or summer vacation, he doted on his grandson very, very much. The number of times that Toshiki was looked upon with disregard just because his grandfather was a politician and a minister certainly weren't few. But he never thought, even once, that he wanted his grandfather to quit being a politician. Because it was his beloved grandfather, he wanted him to continue his career as long as possible from the bottom of his heart. However, Toshiki was being held hostage, and his grandfather was being threatened. His grandfather, who called him the apple of his eye, was surely suffering. He might do anything to save his grandson. Maybe even put aside his ideology if it was required to save his grandson. He might cave into his culprit's demands if it meant saving his grandson. When Toshiki thought about that, an inexplicable anger welled up within him. His current situation, he was unable to forgive the cowards who would make his beloved grandfather suffer by such dastardly means. That feeling swelled up inside of him, displacing the fear. What he thought of first was something that any boy would imagine. Get out of these bonds, beat up the bad guys, then hand them over to the police. Images of all the brave heroes from all the manga he'd read passed through the back of his mind. In his imaginary scenario, he slipped his bonds easily, floating like a butterfly to evade his captors, then stinging like a bee to bring them all down. In the end, it was nothing more than his silly little fantasy. With his vision obstructed, unable to see anything, it was something that he could get into more than any anime at the moment. In actuality, he was enjoying these little scenarios in his head for the long period of time he was tied up. His captors hadn't really done anything to him that they would feel sorry for. However, eventually he began to grow tired of his fantasies, and more realistic scenarios began to run through his head. It was then he realized that none of them were a solution. Yes, he wanted to do something for his grandfather who was being threatened. But he was being held here to inflict pain on his grandfather, the thing that he could least forgive, and also the most vexing. And then he noticed. There was a much simpler way he could save his grandfather without having to beat up his despicable captors. That was to remove himself as a hostage from the hands of these villains. If he was to disappear from here, his captors would have nothing to threaten his grandfather with. Captors had restrained him, but they didn't treat him roughly, made sure he was fed well enough. Meaning at most, he was nothing more than the means for their threat. They weren't looking to bully or kill him out of spite. If he behaved, no ill would befall him. Realizing that gave him a strong sense of courage, and carrying his train of thought this far, he let it run its course to its natural conclusion. Right now, at this moment, Toshiki Inugai had decided to escape. His ears had been stuffed with a sponge-like material, acting as makeshift earplugs. However, they didn't actually do much to block out any sound. He could overhear everything his captors were saying. Realizing that this was to his advantage, even when his captors spoke to him, he acted like he couldn't hear them due to the earplugs. His captors, thinking that he couldn't hear their conversation, talked about all sorts of things without any reservations. Thanks to that, he was able to obtain various pieces of information. First off, this wasn't Tokyo. It seemed this was quite a distance away. On top of that, in the countryside nestled deep in the mountains. It also seemed that his captors were inconvenienced living out here. We could deduce that the place was far removed from any sort of town. Finally, whenever they went out to buy food or other supplies, they would always take a car. That fact caused him some dismay, because he knew that the method he learned at school of running around blindly while shouting for help wouldn't work here. He paused his little mental escape scenario there. His ultimate goal was to find somebody who would help him. Somebody who fit that description wasn't close by, his chances of escaping successfully grew slim. A desolate, far-off land deep in the mountains, a place where he couldn't even go shopping without using a car. His situation, escaping would be very difficult. He grew desperate, and after a little while, he returned to his original scenario, imagining becoming a hero. In the manga he read, beating down his captors became his respite. However, as he played those delusions out in his head, his heart, hating to surrender, continued to search for a way to escape. And then, he thought of a way. The goal was far away, and all he had to do was get closer. His goal, in a nutshell, was to find somebody who would help him. In other words, somebody other than his captors. If he faked being sick, then his captors would have to take him to the hospital, or bring a doctor to him. They would probably be reluctant to do that, but he already knew that the hostage was more important than anything. The off chance that something happened, like him dying, occurred, they wouldn't be able to threaten anybody anymore. Luckily, he had an experience that would help him fake a serious illness. At the end of last year, he was inadvertently involved in a car accident and had to undergo surgery. The scar from that surgery was still clearly visible on his lower torso. He recalled the pain and suffering from that time. The existence of that experience would make a huge impact on the realism of his performance, and he was quite confident in his ability to fake an illness. His captors at first took that as a sign he needed to use the washroom. Untying only his arms, they tried to bring him there while he was still blindfolded, but he didn't try to get up. His hands, now free, only clutched at his abdomen as he writhed in agony.
おい、どうしたんだ? 腹でも痛いのか?
He still had his earplugs in, so he had to pretend he didn't hear his captors asking the question. He was about to nod, so he hurriedly had to stop himself.
小僧が腹を押さえてるよ。腹痛かな?
Captors looked down on his suffering form for a bit. One of them proposed a course of action, while another laid his doubts that Toshiki might be faking it.
坊主、腹痛むんかい?
そいつ、耳を塞いでるから聞こえてないぜ。
参ったんな。腹痛に効く薬なんかあらんね。薬局行って買ってくるか。
腹痛って言ったっていろんな薬があるだろう。症状がわからないうちはいい加減な薬は買えないぜ。
腹押さえてるし、便秘やん。便秘薬でも買ってくれば収まるやんね。間違って飲んでも死なんしな。
決めつけるなよ。盲腸とかかもしれないだろう。俺のおじさんがさ、昔急になったことあってよ。あれはかなりビビったぜ。
Hey Shy, welcome back. One of the captors leaned over beside the boy, who was bent over in agony.
かわいそうにな。全身汗だらけじゃないかよ。腹か？痛むのか？おいおい、痛むんならあんまり抑え込んじゃかえって悪いぞ。
Realizing that his captors were concerned about his stomach, he, inadvertently, let his shirt right up, letting the scar from his surgery come into plain view. His vision was obscured with packing tape, so he couldn't see their reaction to his scar. His captors were taken aback. Judging from their momentary silence, he'd obtained the reaction he was looking for.
おい、やばいぜ。この手術跡、そんなに昔のものじゃないぜ。
その小僧、熱出てるんかいね。体温計あるん？
あるわけねえよ。でもすごい汗だぜ。おでこは結構熱いと思う。緊張状態が続くとさ、昔の傷なんかに応えたりするって聞いたことあるぜ。
じゃあどうすんよ。薬じゃ治らんちゅんてんか？
何の手術跡か知らねえけど、とにかくまずいだろう。下手すると命に関わるぜ。
まずいんて。こりゃ本当にまずいんて。
医者に見せた方がいい。このままじゃ突然ぽっくりいっちまう可能性だってあるだろう。
Toshiki Inugai, with those few words, knew that the situation was progressing exactly as he had envisioned it. and snickering to himself on the inside, pressed his act even further. He didn't even need to know that his captors were panicked. Need to see to know that his captors were panicked and were running around like chickens with their heads cut off at this troublesome turn of events.
診療所を連れて行くか。
そりゃまずん。先生を連れてくる方がいいね。
入江の先生か？いいのか？大丈夫か？
人質に何かあったらまずんね。しゃあない。緊急事態やん。
One of the captors hurriedly left in the car. Another of the men, completely shaken up at this point, wiped the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. It looked like they were bringing a doctor. As long as the doctor wasn't an accomplice, that doctor was his goal. He was someone he should seek help from. His captors were probably wary of that happening. They would be prepared for it. This would all come down to luck. Some of the sweat emerging from his brow was from that nervousness. At that moment, the packing tape that was covering his eyes and ears was torn off. The burning light that he was seeing for the first time in several days hurt his eyes. After that, the gag that made it hard for him to breathe was also removed.
大丈夫かこそ。今お医者を連れてくるからな。しばらく我慢してろな。
Doctor was coming. The doctor was coming. Now how was he going to ask for help? How was he going to get away from his captors? A plethora of thoughts began swirling through his
分かっ
mind.
てると思うが、お医者に余計なことは言うなよ。俺たちも別にお前に乱暴がしたいわけじゃないんだ。そりゃ分かってるよな。
Yoshiki Inugai nodded while feigning pain and obedience. His expectations and the enemy's expectations. Whether they doubted he was faking his illness or not, they knew what his goal was and would try to stop it. His stomach contracted from the stress of this gambit, making it seem like his stomach really was starting to hurt. No, it really was. There was no reason to panic. Failed with his approach to the doctor, there was nothing to lose. There was something to lose, this method of faking illness to get in touch with the doctor. He could think of other methods from here on out, it wasn't much. But at the present, this was the easiest, most dramatic way he could think of. The more he thought about it, the more it looked like this was his first and last gambit. Eventually, he heard the sound of a car approaching once again. The sound of the car doors being hurriedly opened and shut. Sounds of several footsteps approaching. A young man in a white medical coat. He acknowledged the boy. A suspicious look showed itself on his face.
彼は村の子じゃありませんね。
The captors didn't respond. From the looks of it, the young doctor realized that this was an abnormal situation. One of the captors talked threateningly.
先生には関係のないことです。
For a while, the doctor and captors silently glared at one another. However, unable to stand the sight of the boy continuing to suffer, the doctor, as the captors had hoped, didn't press any further.
その古い手術跡というのが気になります。何の手術でしたか？
そりゃわからないです。
本当は診療所に連れ帰るべきなんですがね。
先生、そりゃさすがにちょっと。
The doctor said he wanted to bring the boy back to the clinic, but the captors simply, silently shook their heads at the notion. It was a fleeting hope, but it was only natural that the captors would refuse. At that moment, his eyes met with the doctor's. Seeing that the boy's painful state was abnormal, the doctor suspected it was a serious illness.
大丈夫ですか？私は医者です。この手術跡はいつ頃のものですか？
去年の冬に事故で。
事故？そうですか。参ったな。
Didn't let the doctor figure out that he was faking it here. He had to somehow figure out some way to keep this going and tell the doctor that he was being confined and needed help.
患部を少し触りますよ。痛むところがあったら言ってくださいね。
Seeing that it was extremely painful, the doctor crossed his arms and began to ponder. He had to somehow get himself to a hospital. To Toshiki Inugai, faking this illness was the performance of a lifetime. And speaking of time, you love anime glasses? Yeah, I love how he looks down, they go completely white. There was actually a dude who built those. He attached like LEDs to the inside of it so it would light up and like shine out. If you haven't seen it, look it up. It's fantastic. And entirely unnecessary and looks entirely gaudy as anything. But yeah, I think that's where we are going to stop for today. Thank you to everyone who tuned in.